Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
Lisa, I'm telling you, Mom's only coming for a couple days. It's a couple days more than she needs, but when are you two going to stop fighting? You two are impossible to reason with. Alvin, as usual, shook his hands and left the room, which meant that he was not going to discuss anything else today, and his decision regarding his mother's arrival would remain unchanged. We didn't finish the conversation. Lisa was not going to give up so easily. I did. You're both equally dear to me. I don't want to be torn between you trying to reconcile you. Alvin, I spent 5 years honestly trying to please her, being nice, being open, giving her gifts, giving her the granddaughter your mother always dreamed of. And what did I get? Rudeness, insults, tons of dirt behind her back and in her eyes, and the cherry on the cake, a demand for DNA testing to confirm your paternity. Don't you think your mom's a little over the top? Like 1,000 times. The woman was being completely sincere. 5 years ago, she literally agreed to get married after a couple dates. Her husband's family took her coolly. They thought that their son deserved more than a single mother with a child in her arms. They did not take into account such trifles as 2 higher education, a prestigious position before maternity, and the prospect of returning to it with a promotion, reading, high moral principles. In general, in another situation, Lisa wouldn't even look in the direction of Alvin, but fate gave her an extremely poor choice: to marry and bring up her son in a full family, or to become a single mother, behind whose back neighbors whispered without ceasing. Beautiful, intelligent, and self-confident Lisa has always strived to be the best. Studying, sports, dancing, she had no equal in any case she took on. The only area that the girl did not devote time to socializing with the opposite sex, it was as if she did not notice the amorous looks of classmates, trying not to notice or quickly turning the boy into friends. The girl, by the end of school, managed not to spin a single novel. Girlfriends could not understand her, because even the most enviable handsome were rejected. Suitors gradually found more affordable options and disappeared from the horizon. About the reason for this behavior, she did not tell anyone, and she was banal and simple. Her father is an alkie. Daily scandals, parents, obscene appearance and behavior of the father contributed to the fact that the girl decided for herself not to repeat the fate of her mother. No man, no problems, but you can pay attention to your studies, career, self-development. Lisa was the only child in the family, and therefore she had no one to share her worries with. If she had a close friend or an older sister, she would have explained that her father's behavior was not normal, and that there were many worthy men in the world who could create a strong and loving family. Lisa, your number was asked again by that cute new boy from the parallel. Her friends were actively trying to interfere in her personal life. Cute? You saw him? Yeah, shock. Figure, face, dressed in style. But give him your number too. Why are you so lost? You know, I'm not interested. If I didn't know you, I'd have thought you were a girl since kindergarten. Laughed friend. Listen, that's an idea. Why don't you tell all the handsome boys that I'm chasing you? Lisa was fed up with the almost daily suggestions, confessions, and attempts at loneliness on the part of her friends. Let's not do this. Graduation is coming up, and I don't need this kind of fame at all. Mary smiled. Even she didn't know why Lisa was so actively avoiding guys. After school, the girl entered 2 prestigious universities at once and was able to combine full-time study in one and part-time in the other. Thus, a few years later, she had a law degree and a translator from English and German, a perfect combination for working abroad. It was moving to another country that was her cherished dream. Thanks to the successful defense of her diploma, she quickly found a good job, which meant traveling abroad and the possibility of transferring to one of the foreign branches. All her plans went nowhere when in one beautiful evening she met him. That day, she was delayed in training, and waiting for public transportation was almost impossible. When she saw an expensive foreign car pull up to the stop, the girl was a little frightened. However, a tall, athletic, and very handsome young man got out of the car and offered to give her a ride home. Naturally, she politely refused. Then he drove the car to the parking lot and went to walk her home. During the hour they spent on the road, they had time to talk about everything. It turned out that they had a lot in common: favorite books, music, passion for sports. The young man impressed her with his manners. He was well-read, erudite, and attentive. The story began as in a cheap novel. Beautiful courtship, expensive gifts, talking until morning. Brian was amazing, the likes of which she had never met. Most importantly, he was the complete opposite of her father, who was for the girl a model of what a man should not be under any circumstances. No wonder the girl fell in love. The feelings that she finally allowed to take possession of her heart were so beautiful, new, and exciting that she was ready to do anything for the sake of her beloved. All the power of the first crush she put into this relationship. Even her colleagues, with whom she kept a strictly professional relationship, began to notice the change in her. "Lisa, you're especially mysterious today. Has our modest girl fallen in love?" The secretary of the boss did not hide her delight at the changes that had taken place in the girl. The new girl was well received at work, seeing how hard she was working. Unfortunately, behind the veil of love, she did not notice the obvious. The young man never spent holidays together, tried not to appear with her in public places, did not introduce her to friends, and was almost always busy at weekends. The more experienced girl guessed the reason for this behavior. For Lisa, the truth was revealed only on the day when she saw 2 stripes on the test in the morning and decided to make her lover happy. "Brian, I have a small, or rather, very big and amazingly beautiful gift for you." Blushing, said the girl, handing the young man a small box tied with a neat golden bow. "Sweetheart." From this word, the girl's legs just shook. "I asked you not to give me gifts. You do not have such financial resources, and it should be a man. This gift is special. I'm sure you will be pleased." However, on the face of her beloved, she read the whole gamut of emotions, among which there was neither joy, nor happiness, nor delight. Favorite features distorted grimace of disgust and anger. He closed the box abruptly and threw it to the ground. "I hope this is a joke. Brian, are you not happy?" The girl was confused and didn't know how she should react. "Are you crazy? Have you tried to think with your head?" "Brian, what are you doing?" "It was unexpected for me too, and it will affect my plans a lot. But this is our child, the fruit of our love. It's the product of your endless stupidity. Do you really think I want it? Or did you do it on purpose to get money out of me?" "Well, the most you can expect is that I'll pay for the termination of your pregnancy. After that, you'll be out of my life and out of my family's life." "Your what?" "My family. You got a hearing problem all of a sudden." Lisa stared at this rude, cold, selfish man and couldn't believe she was looking at the same perfect, loving, gentle, generous Brian she'd been dating for almost 6 months. "What do you mean?" "Oh, come on. Are you so stupid you didn't realize I'm married?" "I'm not gonna leave my wife for you in this." The man nodded squeamishly toward the girl's belly. "I'm not going to terminate the pregnancy. I was diagnosed with serious problems in high school. It is contraindicated for me." The girl spoke in a colorless voice, as if she had been drained of all her life force. Come on, people like you give birth like cats. Seeing how the girl was confused, not knowing what to say. Apparently, she wasn't lying about her health, he said a little softened. I'll pay you the best clinic. Everything will be done as correctly and accurately as possible. It will not affect your health. You will have time to have more children, but this child should not be born. I don't need these problems. My father-in-law is a very powerful man. If he finds out I've been horny with his daughter, it'll be both you and me. It seemed that he still had some feelings for the girl. His tone became so official, as if he was selling a car in an elite salon. No need, I'm not going to demand anything from you. Goodbye. Lisa abruptly turned around and walked towards the bus stop. Her condition after what she had heard did not even allow her to cry. Brian was not going to leave the last word to her. He caught up with her, grabbed her arm roughly and turned her around. You don't seem to understand what I said. You're not having this baby. What are you going to raise it on? You just got your degree a couple months ago. No place to live. No savings. You're gonna live on welfare. Where are you gonna live with him? With a drunk daddy? A girl confided in her lover her deepest secret, the tragedy of their life for her father. Brian, I won't change my mind. If you don't want the baby, I'm not forcing it on you. Let me through, I'm late. Your son's gonna grow up to be a juvenile delinquent. He'll hate you for the life you'll give him. The man was ready to tear her apart, still holding her hand. The girl had serious concerns that he wanted to push her down the stairs. It could be the girl. Lisa suddenly realized that all the feelings she had for this man had evaporated, burst like a soap bubble. If you are so frightened by my precarious financial situation, I am ready to make a bilateral agreement that I will not declare you the father and demand money. A strange premonition told Lisa to protect herself and the future child. And on the other hand, what are my responsibilities? I could hear the interest in the man's voice. And on the other hand, you will never appear in our lives and will not claim to communicate with the child. Are you out of your mind? What do I want with this degenerate? So it's decided. Let's go. No, I'll draw up the contract myself, and we'll get it signed tomorrow. I'm afraid my expertise in this matter won't be enough for you. I'll pick you up at 10 o'clock. They were practically enemies when they parted. She'd never been so devastated in her life. The remnants of her faith in men and their decency had burned away, leaving a disgusting residue on her soul. All men are the same after all, unreliable, irresponsible liars. The next day, they signed an agreement and parted for good. At least that's what Lisa hoped for with all her soul. It was painful and hurtful to become a single mother, but deep down, the girl had no regrets. She never wanted to get married, but she had always dreamed of becoming a mother. She was the only child in the family. Her mother decided not to have more children when her father started drinking. The girl always envied her friends who had brothers and sisters, especially the younger ones. She liked to take care of them, and now she was going to have a child of her own. Lisa realized that it would be very difficult for her, but she did not dare to terminate the pregnancy. The risk was too great that this child was her only chance for motherhood. The doctor who monitored her pregnancy supported her in her decision to keep the baby, no matter what. You know, nowadays so many women are treated for infertility. Someone in their youth was seriously ill. Someone had an abortion. Someone seems to be healthy, but there are no children. You can find a man with a child, but infertility, few people will be happy. Besides, such an obstruction as you have very often passes after childbirth. The body recovers, don't worry. You're smart, grown up, with education and a job. Some people give birth in worse conditions and do not worry. Besides, there are measures to support single mothers. You can even live with your child for a while in a special hostel. Some girls live there for quite a long time, find a job, look after each other's children. I have a place to live and a job. Besides, I can come back after my maternity leave. I hope I can. But even more so, you doubt it. But if you come up with an idea, you don't have more than 2 weeks. I'm not second-guessing my decision. A child doesn't ask its parents to show up. If they don't have the brains to take action and not get pregnant, you can't blame it on the baby. Lisa was glad to have someone to support her. The second person was the mom. She was worried about her daughter's future, but tried not to show it. She promised to support her in any decision she made. She was able to explain to the boss that she was ready to work remotely, if possible, and to go half a day after the birth of the child. She was met and guaranteed to keep her place. The boss did not plan to lose the promising girl so easily. 7 months later, she went on maternity leave, and after another month on Christmas night, the biggest gift and the most long-awaited person, her son, was born. As she feared, his father did not take the news of his grandson well. While she worked, rented a room, and rarely came home, he limited himself to insults and taunts. Well, our perfect you brought in the hem after all? Who knocked you up? Did you pay off your boss for the position? Or did you find someone easier? Lisa tried not to listen to the nasty things her father was always generous with. It seemed that his supply of nasty things was simply inexhaustible. When the young woman came home from the maternity hospital with her son, the real nightmare began. The drunken man organized daily scandals, demanded that she and the child get out of his house. Even periodic visits from the police had no effect. After 6 months of such a life, the woman firmly decided to leave the parental home. Without income and with a child in her arms, it was problematic, so her mother offered her a logical at that time to marry. This option seemed to her the only possible, so she would get the status of a married woman. Behind the back would stop whispering neighbors, and the child would have a full family, but these reasons were just a cover. In reality, Lisa was exhausted mentally and physically. She simply could not find the strength to think of any other way out of the situation. Sitting in the kitchen one evening, they decided that they should choose the quietest, calmest, and non-drinker. So there was at least some hope that the husband will not become a copy of his father. She chose the most deserving one, in her opinion. Alvin lived in a neighboring district, worked as an automobile mechanic. Having finished 11 grades, he went to the army, and after it, he worked for several years for himself, often changing jobs. He didn't grab stars from the sky, Lisa's mother often said. Most importantly, he got along well with little Thomas, who wouldn't go into the arms of anyone but his mother and grandmother. Alvin was ready to get married. He was not embarrassed by the child, so they did not delay the wedding. After a modest wedding, the young family moved into Alvin's apartment, which had been given to them by their grandmother when they were still at school. It was unusual for a woman to wake up and fall asleep without screams and insults from her father. The husband was indeed calm, but a little jealous. She attributed this to insecurity. With the son, the husband got along with her, treated her with care and reverence. The woman simply did not believe her own happiness. The only thing that alarmed the young woman, the mother of the future spouse. She did not hide her contemptuous attitude to the young woman, despite the fact that she was not a peer, was rather her son than a newfound daughter-in-law. The woman thought that this person had rounded up her son and forced him to marry her. After the wedding, she came to the apartment to the newlyweds and made an ugly scandal with insults and breaking dishes. The husband did not stand up for Lisa, justifying his mother's behavior by the fact that she was always jealous of him with girls. Such behavior became the norm in their relationship. Calm, attentive in ordinary days, next to his mother, her husband changed dramatically. She made him dance to her tune, which is why she decided to minimize communication with her husband's relatives. Neither she nor her son went to any of their family celebrations. The situation may have changed when Lisa and Alvin had a daughter. They came to her parents' house to introduce their granddaughter. The new grandmother didn't last long. "She's not like us. She took one of her kids on my son. Now she's taking the other one for a walk." "Alvin, aren't you going to object?" "Mom, stop it. They're my kids, and don't insult me and my wife with that kind of innuendo." It was obvious that the man was reluctant to intervene. Ever since he was a child, he had been trained not to cross his mother. God gave him a daughter-in-law who was a whore. What about our eldest daughter-in-law, smart, beautiful with education, live abroad, prestigious work, in the hem of the husband do not bring unclear whose children? The last statement overflowed the cup of Lisa's patience. She gathered the children and left the apartment of her husband's parents with the firm intention of never seeing these people again. 3 years have passed since then. The children went to kindergarten, and the woman was able to go to work. Fortunately, 2 red diplomas and excellent knowledge had had the desired effect. She no longer tried to make contact with her spouse's relatives. Alvin traveled alone to visit them. Not long ago, his older brother and his spouse returned. At one time, they did not stop by until attending Alvin and Lisa's wedding. Neither made any attempt to socialize, or at least get acquainted, after their return. A year later, after the birth of their daughter, Lisa's father passed away, and her mother finally had the opportunity to live for herself. Repeated attempts to divorce her drinking husband ended in beatings and harassment. Once, her father almost burned down the apartment where Mom lived after she left him. After that, she gave up all attempts to leave, trying to simply survive. Lisa supported Mom financially, and in turn, she helped a lot with the grandchildren. The children did not know that in addition to their beloved grandmother, they had another grandmother, grandfather, and uncle. There were periodic conflicts in the family. The husband was jealous of the woman's colleagues, believing that she went to work only to find a lover. The woman knew where these accusations were coming from, but tried to smooth over the conflicts. Within a year, she was able to move up the career ladder significantly, thanks to persistence, diligence, and a huge amount of knowledge. However, her husband's mother had her own version of the fast promotion. "Son, you should be more careful in the doors. Horns will spoil them for us." Jokes of this kind became the norm in communication with Alvin. "Mom, I told you before, I don't like that kind of innuendo." "What hints? I'm telling you plainly, your wife is sleeping with the right people, so she went up the career ladder." "Mom, think about what you're saying." "She has 2 higher education. She sat every day over the textbooks, so that in the maternity do not forget all that she learned. In addition, she additionally works at home, writes thesis coursework for students. I earn several times less than her, gifts for the holidays, by the way, she also bought. So let her choke on them. I don't need anything from her." The woman defiantly threw in the trash an expensive hair dryer and razor, which her son brought them as a gift for their wedding anniversary. "Mom, by the way, these are not cheap things. They cost as much as my monthly paycheck. If you don't want to use it, give it to someone else. After all, take pity on your father. He doesn't see his grandchildren because of your feud. It's a great misfortune not to see other people's children. There's a whole brood of kids in the sandbox outside. You can pick anyone and sit and admire them." Sometimes Alvin looked at his mother and did not understand how it was possible to be such a disgusting person. And how all these years his father endures such a woman beside him. Mother, I forbid you even to hint that Betty is not my daughter. In your own house you will forbid it, but here I am the mistress. You're afraid to say a word in your own house. You're afraid to show your horns. You know, Mom, I learned that from my father. He's been afraid to say a word against you all his life. You see, this snake wants to break us up on purpose so that you stop communicating with your parents and family. She's setting you against us, you Megara. She's forgotten about you. She only buys presents on holidays. She's trying. She needs you. My brother arrived 2 months ago. Have you ever seen him? No, because that bastard doesn't allow it. She fooled you around and is happy that she took you away from your family. Mom, Alvin sat down in the chair tiredly. Brian doesn't want to see me, and I've tried several times. He always has reasons to refuse to see me because he has no time, or his wife has other plans, or they have another examination. I don't understand why they came back at all, as if they couldn't find suitable doctors abroad. Stop saying that. Kathy's trying to give us an heir. She's healing. She's not giving up hope. Not like your rat, who's had babies from who knows who. The marriage was unequal, but the bride's father saw potential in his son-in-law. A year after the wedding, the young family moved to live abroad. Their capable Brian headed a branch of his father-in-law's firm, ideal in every respect family life, marred only by the lack of children. The young wife was treated in the most famous clinics, passing endless examinations. The husband only once allowed himself to be examined, motivated by the fact that he has in this regard, everything is fine. The second son, Alvin, the mother did not particularly complain. He grew up disobedient, brawling, and mischievous. He found it difficult to study, and in his spare time he preferred to chase pigeons in the yard rather than sit over books. Completely uninterested in anything, he barely finished school. His parents and brother tried to influence him, but it had no effect. His mother did not consider her youngest son worthy of her attention, so she was rather cool to his idea to get married. Everything changed when she personally met the future younger daughter-in-law. At the time when the brother got married and moved abroad, Alvin was serving in the army. It appeared that the brothers had not seen each other for many years, and on Brian's part, there was no effort to remedy this. The favorite son was a frequent guest at his parents' house, but never crossed paths with his younger brother. Whenever Alvin warned that he was going to visit them, the older brother would find 1,000 reasons to postpone the visit. The younger brother was hurt by this neglect, but there was nothing he could do about it. One day the father quietly said that the eldest son and the mother had some secrets, and they concerned the Alvin family. Son, be careful with Lisa. This couple is up to something bad. And now, quite unexpectedly, Alvin's mother decided to change her long-standing anger into mercy and come to visit her youngest son, and not just to come, but to stay overnight. She hadn't planned to ask her daughter-in-law's permission, even her son. Rather than warn her, she had put her in front of the fact. After his father's warning, Alvin was wary of his mother's initiative. However, the most difficult thing was to convince her spouse to accept such an unpleasant relative at home. Lisa, I told you, Mom's only coming for a couple of days. That's a couple days more than she needs. But when are you two going to stop feuding? You're both impossible to reason with. No one's ever tried to reason with me. For years I've been listening to a torrent of filth about my infidelity, about leaving you horns, giving birth to Betty from who knows who, giving you a son. By the way, you knew I had a child before we were married, and it didn't bother you. If it was so important to you, why didn't you tell me before the wedding? Because I've loved him from day one like he was my own. They are equally dear to me, and people around me say that he looks like me. Lisa was tempted to stay overnight at her mother's house, but her hated mother-in-law might take this as cowardice, and she had never been a coward. Therefore, after sitting at work for as long as possible, having done all the accumulated work, she slowly went home by the farthest road. Never in her life had she felt such a heavy reluctance to go home. Usually she hurried from work, anticipating communication with her beloved family. Today she had to endure a serious test, but she was not going to avoid her mother-in-law. Besides, she was on her own turf and could always kick the hated relative out the door. Carefully opening the door, Lisa entered the apartment. It was quiet. She even thought that the mother-in-law changed her mind and did not go to them. However, after a minute, the woman heard muffled voices from the living room. Mother and son were talking about something. The woman had not intended to eavesdrop, but as she headed for the bathroom, she heard Alvin's mother say her name and involuntarily listened. I'm telling you, you're Lisa. For once, her mother-in-law called her daughter-in-law by her first name. She got Thomas pregnant with Brian, knowing he was married. She wanted to tear his family apart and marry him off. She demanded money to keep quiet so her wife wouldn't find out, so they wouldn't be at your wedding. I was afraid she was crazy. She'd ruin his life. I saw them several times when she was out with him. That's why I couldn't accept her. I almost ruined the family of one son, and I took up the second one. If you had kids of your own, you'd understand. I have kids of my own. One more comment like that, and you're going home. The buses don't run anymore, or are you going to put your own mother out on the street like a dog? However, this time, the woman didn't come to sling mud at her daughter-in-law. She had a plan, and her youngest son needed to be lured into being an ally. And now they're having problems. They can't give birth, so I decided. Why don't you give Thomas and his wife away? He's his son, and you'll still have a girl, or you'll have more. Your girl gives birth on demand, so maybe you'll have one. Mom, stop it. I told you I won't tolerate this attitude. Why didn't you tell me before that Thomas was my nephew? How could you know all these years and not tell me? And how could you think of taking a child away from its mother? Well, that's where you're gonna help us. We need to make you recognized as a bad mother, then it will be possible to conduct a DNA examination, prove paternity, and take away the child. Inadequate fulfillment of parental rights, body lifestyle, your wife fits such a characteristic, and you will testify in court later, beat him, snapped at everyone, did not take care of the children. I'll tell you how and what to say. Lisa is a wonderful mother. Anybody can tell you that. A great mom who left the kids to grandma. As you can see, I'm well informed. Is that why my brother didn't want to see me? Alvin tried to change the subject. Why would he want to see you? You were never friends. You were no match for him. What would you talk about? And your Viper could have seen him. They have a perfect family. Only a child is missing. And here is a ready grown-up boy. No need to wash diapers. No need to spoil his figure with freaks. Alvin listened to his mother and could not believe his own ears. She was talking about the fate of her grandson, as if he was an unimportant thing. Mom, aren't you curious about this? I guess me, Lisa. Thomas? Who's gonna ask you? The boy's got a chance to grow up in a normal family, with money and opportunities, and what are you going to give him? Your stupid swimming and sculpting lessons? Don't make me laugh. You should be grateful that your brother is doing you such a favor. But let's say you don't care about our feelings. What about Brian's wife? Kathy, would you mind bringing up the child her ideal husband's mistress gave birth to? If I'm counting correctly, he started dating Lisa literally months after the wedding. I doubt she's his only one, and she didn't know Thomas' father was married. She told me their story, and how scrumptious her brother was when he sent her for an abortion. He didn't want a son then. Has he changed his mind now? I didn't know. That sneaky bitch, setting it up on purpose. Lisa stood outside the door and couldn't believe what she was hearing. The whole story was like the plot of a lowbrow movie. To give birth to one brother and marry another. How small the world was and how different the brothers were. She had never imagined that the perfect Brian, her husband's older brother, the one her mother-in-law had told her so much about, and who had never condescended to meet in person, would turn out to be the Brian she had fallen in love with all those years ago. The one she'd idealized so much and who'd done such a disgusting thing to her. She'd stopped thinking about him a long time ago. After all, if it wasn't for him, she wouldn't have a son, and for that alone he could be forgiven and forgotten. And now her mother-in-law had a nightmarish and disgusting plan that could ruin her family, her life. She knew Brian's capabilities. It would cost him nothing to bribe anyone and get all the necessary certificates to take her son away. There was a faint hope for the contract he'd signed when he'd learned of the pregnancy. But for a man like that, a piece of paper was hardly an obstacle. Lisa pressed her hands to her temples, the blood in her veins pulsing so hard that it seemed that the thin vessels were about to burst. Now it was becoming clear, and the reason for such a strong hatred, mother-in-law to Lisa. The old Megara was afraid that her perfect son would be thrown out by his new rich relatives. For years she had scoffed, claiming that Lisa's daughter had strayed, even though it turned out that both her children, the birth grandchildren to this soulless woman. What kind of monster was now sitting in her living room? It had been hidden from her for years that the man she had loved, who had betrayed her and whom she tried not to remember, was a close relative of her husband. It was good to know that her husband was also uninvolved in the secret. It seemed that the mother-in-law and her favorite son-in-law were keeping this information for a rainy day. But how did they even come to this, to take Thomas away from her? Lisa had never doubted that her mother-in-law was completely devoid of human feelings, but she had tried not to think about Brian for many years and had not expected such a move from him. During their last meeting, when they had made a contract, he had not expressed a desire for further communication. Perhaps the idea of a child came into the mother-in-law's head because Brian and his wife had not been able to have a child of their own for many years. Perhaps the mother-in-law wanted to preserve their family, but not to let in a stranger child from the orphanage. However, the scariest thing was that the woman decided to slander her daughter-in-law, collect certificates about her incapacity, and take away the child. Apparently, the mother-in-law did not think about the fact that she would destroy the family of her youngest son. The main thing for her has always been the eldest. Alvin grew like a field of grass. His birth was not planned, and the mother did not even try to hide from her son that she had made many attempts to get rid of the unwanted pregnancy, and now she was trying to destroy her son's family. In any case, it was impossible to justify such a heinous act, and Lisa decided to stop her mother-in-law from talking to Alvin. She entered the room at the very moment when her husband was running out of arguments and wanted to just kick his mother out the door. During the years of his marriage to Lisa, he had grown so tired of his mother's constant attacks on his family that he was ready to break off the relationship, and the monstrous proposal she had made to him was impossible not to understand, not to forgive. Alvin and his mother turned towards her at the same time. It seemed to Lisa that there was a flicker of relief in her husband's eyes. He would no longer have to fight off his mother alone. "Get out, and don't come near my house and my family again, or I'll tear you to pieces. Even if I go to jail, I'll go out and live in a beautiful world that will be free from such a vile viper like you." Lisa grabbed her mother-in-law by the elbow and finally gave Will, accumulated for many years of resentment and rage. Let me go. Alvin, get that crazy woman out of here. Mom, it's your own fault. She didn't do anything to you. This is the first time a husband has ever openly stood up to Lisa and gone against his mother. I'll wipe you both out. You'll have no children at all. I'll put you out of work, out of money, and out of a place to live. The woman shrieked like a mad woman, cursing her son and his wife. Lisa, almost by the scruff of the neck, dragged her husband's mother to the staircase landing, not paying attention to the screams and curses that she kept on hurling, slammed the door. The woman slid down on the floor on the wall without strength and burst into tears. There was a lot of grief and hatred in her life, but she certainly did not deserve such an attitude from her mother-in-law, and now she was crying from helplessness, realizing that such a vile woman would not leave them alone. The husband stood in the middle of the hallway, not knowing how to act, to calm his wife or rush to bring his mother, whose screams were heard throughout the entrance. Neighbors had already begun to respond to the lamentations and requests for help. It was heard that the woman was approached with an offer of help. This half-witted smashed my head, broke my arm, insulted me with the last words, "I'm barely alive." I got away from them. Kind people, call an ambulance and the police. This can't be left like this. After these words, Lisa raised her crying face to her husband and said, "It's time for you to choose. Either you protect the family and now somehow influence your mother, or you stay with her on her side and now leave for good. I don't intend to put up with this anymore. I will file a police report on her tomorrow, and believe me, I will point out everything there, the insults, the slander, and the attempts to take the child away." Alvin could not believe that his own mother could do such a despicable thing to his family. He always felt and knew he was not a favorite child. A disappointment, that's what his mother had always called him. Against his successful, intelligent, driven brother, he was always an annoyance. It's a tough family. Sighed his mother in response to the teacher's complaints about the teenager's poor academic performance and bad behavior. He wanted so much to make her proud of him. He'd chosen the most beautiful and intelligent woman to marry, hoping her mother would appreciate it, but she'd hated Lisa as if she'd done something nasty to her, and today he'd learned the reason for that attitude. He did not understand how his mother could think of such a thing. He had loved little Thomas from the first day and could not imagine his life without him. Without considering his opinion, his mother decided to help preserve the family of the eldest son by destroying the family happiness of the youngest. It seemed that at this moment in Alvin's soul, everything he had spent many years creating crumbled. He was about to lose half of his family, and he really couldn't decide which half to choose. He was afraid to even imagine life without his wife, daughter, son, who also turned out to be his own nephew. But it was also scary to cut all ties with his parents and brother. Most of all, he felt sorry for his father, whose mother had definitely forbidden any contact with him. Sighing, Alvin went to the landing, grabbed his mother under her arm, and dragged her forcefully toward the exit. Once outside, he threw her on a bench and let the emotions that had built up in him over the years come out. "Mom, I'm warning you for the last time. Leave my family alone. If you do 1/10 of what you've planned, I swear to you, you and Brian are going to wish you hadn't thought of this in the first place. I will wipe you out. Believe me, I have ample opportunity to remind you that my wife is a successful lawyer, and how many people I have in my car repair shop, you have never dreamed. You could be sure that I will involve them all, and the wife of my brother. It is high time to learn about his crystal integrity, although perhaps let her father first learn about it. He's not the last man in town, so let it influence his son-in-law. Maybe his daughter's horns will stop growing so fast. You wouldn't dare," Mother hissed. Who do you think you are? You're nothing compared to your brother, a loser, a failure, a nothing, an empty space. And yet this nothing will defend his family. Thomas is my son. I've been planning to adopt him for a long time. Now I'm going to adopt him. We have a full, happy family. I told you not to do it. The woman didn't even seem to think that her spineless youngest son would dare to disobey. You won't believe it. I'm not going to listen to you. Alvin said with a laugh. He felt that he had been silent for years, and now he had a voice. He wanted to say everything. The DNA will show that Brian is his father anyway. Yeah, and it'll also show that we're related to him. Plus, Lisa has a pledge signed by your eldest that he has no claim to her child. Don't tell me you didn't know that. I did, but that stupid girl drew it up herself. I'll never believe it's even valid. It's notarized, so your favorite son has no rights to Thomas. I'm still gonna get him taken away from you. They want the baby. And then Alvin finally realized that the whole baby plan was the mother's idea. Brian may not have been aware of it at all. It was obvious that his family was in big trouble, and his mother couldn't miss such a fat lot. Mom, do they even want him? Have you asked their opinion? Brian knows, but he's not very excited about the prospect. He doesn't want kids, but his wife has started the adoption papers. Thomas is perfect for them. He's not some homeless kid with alcoholic genes. Your Lisa isn't the best choice either, but it's a choice. Alvin was so horrified by what he heard that he sat down on the bench with his arms around his head. Mom, can you hear yourself? People are not puppets. You can't control the fate of living people like that. Thomas is just a child. Have you thought about him? He has loving parents. You want to take him away from us? Put him through a lot of stress. Then you're going to give him away to people who don't really want him. I'm not talking about you destroying our family, breaking the law dozens of times and wasting a lot of money and nerves. Is it really worth it? Let your brother and his wife take a child from an orphanage. Their children live for years without parental affection and love, but be happy that at least one will break out of this system and get into a family. I didn't breed these puppies to regret and bring them up. You were enough for me, although I probably should have put you in a shelter too. Maybe they would have made a human out of you. For the first time in his life, Alvin realized how much of a monster his mother was, indifferent, cynical, and mean, and he was still trying to get his wife to get in touch with her. He should have broken off the relationship long ago, but he hoped in his heart that she would love him and be proud of him. When Betty was born, he had hoped that the arrival of a little granddaughter would soften the grandmother's heart. How wrong he had been. Her suspicions that Lisa had fattened up her daughter were only a screen. In fact, his mother was simply impossible to please, except for the adored eldest son. She loved no one and never loved. Mom, I don't want to discuss this with you anymore, but I'm warning you, if you mess with my family, hold on, I'll forget that you and I are related. My son and my daughter are more related to me, and I will protect them from you in every way I can. The man went home with his head down. He could not believe that from this day begins one of the most difficult periods in his life. He had no doubt that his mother would not rest. He had to prepare, to think about every little detail. He and Lisa needed to build a strong wall to defend themselves against an enemy like his mother. When he entered the apartment, his wife was still sitting on the floor in front of the door, devastated, unable to cry. Alvin picked her up and helped her to the couch to comfort her. He rocked her in his arms for a long time like a small child until she fell asleep. In that moment, he decided that he would protect this woman from any evil, even if it came in the form of his own mother. Brian had been in a bad mood since the morning. Things were not going well at work, and his father-in-law considered him to be the one to blame. For several years, the man had been trying to get out of his skin to prove that he was not just the husband of the daughter of the head of the company, but also an excellent specialist. In addition, it was necessary to maintain the image of an ideal family man, and in a marriage of convenience, it becomes difficult, if not unbearable, even in the first years of marriage. And his wife, with her fantasies and unrealizable ideas, decided to become a volunteer. Not enough headaches for him and his mother, but this. He quickly realized that the only way to get anywhere in this life was to go around. Flattery and family ties were a pretty good option. When Brian learned that the CEO had a daughter, he quickly figured out the surest way to the top managers of the company. Pretty but shallow Kathy quickly fell for a beautiful courtship from Daddy's subordinate at one of the corporate events. Brian knew how to please a woman and successfully went to fulfill the plan. After a month, spoiled girl was ready, as they say, to eat out of his hands, and after another month, Brian and Kathy married. To consolidate the success of the young man, put up a lot of work to show the future father-in-law that he is worthy of becoming a member of the family. However, the new relative was in no hurry to entrust his son-in-law with any important position. The spectacular and well-groomed woman had only one flaw, which annoyed Brian terribly. She very much wanted to have children, and despite all her efforts, it was this whim she could not fulfill. "Darling, you're still so young. Why would you want to ruin your figure by getting pregnant at your age? Let me buy you some fancy dog or some other stylish animal, and you will take care of it. And the baby, it's screaming snot. Why would you do that? Hire a trendy nanny? No nannies. I'm gonna raise our child myself. In case you forgot, I'm a certified child psychologist. I know how much that degree cost your dad." Brian thought to himself, but he said out loud, "I don't doubt your pedagogical talent, but I think that we can have children later, by 35, 40 years. Are you crazy? The older the mother, the more likely she is to give birth to an abnormal child. Are you ready to take on the responsibility of having a child like that?" I wasn't planning on taking responsibility for the baby at all. The young husband thought, but out loud he said, "Honey, we can't have a sick child. We are both healthy and carefully monitor our condition." Since the day of the gorgeous wedding, only about a year had passed, and the young husband had already been seen in the company of a spectacular beauty, then another and another. While Kathy underwent one examination after another, her loving husband actively built up her horns. Finally, patience broke, and he sent the young family abroad. The motivation was more than worthy. Examinations with the best specialists, and Brian offered to head one of the European offices. The position he dreamed of so much, in fact, turned out to be a sham. The head did not have the right to vote, could not sign documents, and on all important issues was obliged to consult with his deputy, in fact, the head of the office. The young woman's father could easily destroy his son-in-law, tell his daughter about all his connections on the side. However, he raised her alone. His wife passed away when little Kathy was not even 3 years old. In an attempt to replace mom and dad, the man tried to shield his beloved child from all the misfortunes, to inform her that her hotly beloved husband does not love her and married her for the sake of calculation. The father did not have the strength and spirit. As soon as the hot blood of the ambitious young chief stirred, and he demanded an extension of authority, he was provided with proof of his dissolute metropolitan life. Recognize it. There are at least 5 different girls here, 2 of whom are not socially responsible. Do you think your wife will appreciate this footage? I can prove it's a photo montage, and she can't leave me. Brian tried to be brave, but the shock of seeing the photo would be remembered for a long time. He could lose everything he had worked so hard for. Once subdued, Brian, even for a while, was deliberately attentive and kind to his wife, together with her, visiting endless examinations and taking a lot of tests. This strong desire of his wife to give birth to a child terribly annoyed Brian, who did not plan to burden his own life with such a nuisance. Screaming, stupid, always demanding attention to themselves creatures, did not cause him a bit of tenderness or sympathy. He didn't plan to disrupt his life by having a child. Besides, he was not at all concerned about the proverbial glass of water in his old age. During his life, he planned to earn good money so that it would be enough for the glass and for a nurse who would bring it. And in general, he did not plan so far ahead. Everything in his life he managed without much difficulty. From childhood, he was accustomed to the fact that his appearance was already a happiness and a holiday. His mother was very fond of him. And with the appearance of her second son, she had a daily reason to praise one and humiliate the other. In time, Brian began to treat his brother as a servant. Limited and simple-minded Alvin was a toy in the hands of his brother, and his mother never tired to support Brian in his desire for wealth and luxury. And the other day, his mother shocked him with a completely unbelievable news. It turns out that she has figured out how to solve their problem with Kathy. At the moment when his mother solemnly announced her plan, Brian thought that she was completely out of her mind. Turns out one of his exes had a baby. He remembered that he had sent some knave fool to terminate the pregnancy, but she refused, and now the mother had decided to take the child away so that she and Kathy could adopt it. His lovely wife shared with her mother-in-law her desire to adopt the child. Then the mother very aptly remembered that 5 years ago, her son had shared a problem with her. A pregnant girlfriend had decided to give birth. Apparently, the mother followed that girlfriend, but Brian then began to have problems. His father-in-law exiled him and his wife abroad. They didn't come home even for his younger brother's wedding. His mother had talked them out of it then, saying the wedding wasn't worth their attention. So his mother decided to finish him off with some positive news. "Son, I haven't told you everything. You can adopt not some stranger's kid with strange genetics, but your own son. Are you all right in the head?" My son's voice became hard and rough. "You misunderstand me. I'm talking about the child that girl gave birth to with you. Remember you told me before you left that some girl was expecting a child from you and refused the money you gave her to get rid of it. And what? You're in touch with her. I would like not to communicate, but I can't." The woman exclaimed with hatred. "That sneaky little bitch is married to your brother. Are you kidding me? How is that possible? If I knew he seemed to run after her in his high school years, that he was in the army, and then they met again somewhere, and he continued to court her. She didn't really notice him in high school, but after she had a baby, I guess she wasn't so picky. The wedding was arranged quickly. She rather gave birth to his daughter, so that he did not run away." Enough of my brother's entertaining story of marital happiness. Let's get to the point. Well, they're raising your son now, and Alvin didn't even know Thomas was his nephew. I'm sure his wife didn't realize it either, because you two don't look anything alike. And the same last name didn't surprise her. I knew she had no brains even then. I think her dad was a drunk. Or it wasn't her. She married the first guy she saw so she could leave home with her fetus, and her father died a long time ago. Why are you telling me all this? Because your brother and his whore have another child. The older one can be taken away, and you and Kathy can adopt him. Mom, you make it sound like he's a kitten. Besides, why would I need such proof of my infidelity? My father-in-law would kill me. I'll help you. We'll take him away from them, put him in an orphanage, and from there you and your wife will take him and go abroad again. The mother was glowing with pride. It seemed to her that her plan was perfect because she tried so hard. All the effort she put into making her favorite son was happy. That day, he was able to convince his mother that the idea was as stupid as possible. In no case should not allow his wife to know that he went from her to the left. She naively believed him and thought that he sincerely loved her. It seemed that the mother calmed down for a while, but it was enough for only a week. As it turned out, all this time she spent on running around the organizations. In the competition, she's always so sweet and kind. Would those who knew her hear you? Brian muttered. Did you say something? Nothing, except that you look stunning tonight. You flatter her. Although the man did not have any tender and romantic feelings for his wife, he managed to imitate them skillfully, so that the wife lived in the happy certainty that she got the most loving, gentle, and attentive husband. For complete happiness, she lacked only a child. All doctors in one voice said that she is absolutely healthy and there are no contraindications for conception. It turned out that the husband had problems. However, after a year of infertile attempts, even he gave up and underwent a full examination. He, too, had nothing wrong with his health. The doctor said it happens. You just have to wait, distract yourself, and relax. Kathy couldn't relax. The baby gradually became an obsession. One day, scrolling through social networks, she came across a group in which adoptive parents shared details of their new life, a life in which there was a place for someone else's child, who became their own. In photos and videos, the frozen, withdrawn, emotionless babies gradually thawed, blossomed, began to smile, and became ordinary in life joyful kids. That day, she wasn't too keen on the idea of adoption because she and her husband were young and healthy. It required a little waiting, as the doctor said, but something kept the woman going to that group every day. She had gotten to know many of the babies and could appreciate their progress. And then one day she heard the story of one of the moms who had been pregnant for a long time, decided to adopt, and in the process of doing the paperwork, found out she was pregnant. Kathy digged through mountains of information regarding this phenomenon because, as it turned out, it was far from uncommon, and she saw this as a way out. Besides 2 children, that's twice the joy. Even if she could not give birth to her own, she would have an adopted baby who would also need a family, care, affection, and support of parents. She decided to share her thoughts with her husband, and he did not appreciate her enthusiasm. If on a blood child he was still ready to agree, then on not native, adopted, he could not decide under any conditions. Unexpectedly sharply, Kathy's father also spoke out on this matter. He also saw it as another whim of his daughter. Baby, you will play. You will quickly get bored with studying, wasting time on someone else's child. You will not find in him your traits, the traits of a husband. He'll yell, you'll be tired, and eventually you'll want him back. It's not all rosy on this issue. For every happy foster family, there are 5, if not 10 unhappy ones who regret their decision. You're wrong. I'm being realistic. I don't plan on taking in a child with a disability, but that's only for the reason that you all would be against it. My abilities are sufficient for that. Daughter, as a child, you couldn't even take care of a cat properly. Your endless pets we didn't have time to buy. I understand. You want a child, but it's more like a whim that was not fulfilled, and you stubborn. Admit it to yourself. A baby is not a doll or hamster. You can't take it and play with it and put it back in the shelter. I won't allow it. Okay, then I'll volunteer at the orphanage practice. Are you crazy? If you've got nothing better to do, go to work. Do you want me to get you a job at my firm? Dad, I've been working there for a long time. Have you forgotten? That's right. So come out and start your duties. I'll use the money I earn to buy diapers and formula for the kids. Her husband and father, accustomed to see in her only a charming doll, not endowed with a rich intellect, did not expect such persistence. The woman really decided to test her willpower for strength. She found an organization which, on a gratuitous basis, cooperated with the baby house. Volunteers, mostly young boys and girls, not only helped by collecting necessary supplies, food, but also often on duty with the nurses. They helped to bathe and change the babies who were left without their mothers or just carried them in their arms. Kathy decided to come in the evenings and read stories to the babies. Even though they were the youngest babies on the ward, she knew how important this bedtime ritual was. She herself did not remember her mother well, but she remembered well that she read to her every day. One day, on her way back from her new duty, she decided to walk, and on a bench near the house, she saw a woman with her children. A boy and a girl about 5 and 3 years old, so cute and adorable. They were telling their mother about the events that happened to them in kindergarten, and the mother listened to them attentively, asking questions. Kathy was also admiring the picture, stopping nearby. She liked this family so much that she decided to go over and meet them. She didn't usually do that, but here some sort of mental impulse kicked in. "Hello. I couldn't pass by without admiring you. What a beautiful family you are." The children hid behind their mother, unaccustomed to such attention from strangers. "Oh, I frightened you. I'm sorry." "It's okay. They're just very modest." The children's mom was about the same age as Kathy, and I could already have children of that age. Sad, the woman thought, and said out loud, "My name is Kathy. I'm a volunteer at the orphanage. I thought I'd take a little walk and I met you. I'm Lisa." "And I'm Thomas." The boy had the courage to introduce himself. Beautiful dark hair, blue-eyed boy reminded her of someone very familiar, but she could not remember who. Having a pretty good memory for faces, the woman didn't remember names, and it always took her a long time to remember how she knew this or that random person. However, now there was a completely different feeling about the boy. She had definitely never met him anywhere, but his features were familiar to her. As she briefly thought about it, a dad approached the family, and Kathy realized who she was reminded of by the little boy. It was Alvin, her husband's brother. She couldn't understand why the brothers had stopped talking years ago. She had never met him in person. When she and Brian had married, Alvin had been in the army, and then they had gone overseas and had only recently returned. In all that time, she had only seen her husband's brother in pictures and knew nothing about his family at all. When she and her husband visited his parents, the topic of her younger brother's family was carefully avoided. What was wrong with them? The woman thought, beautiful, young, friendly family, beautiful children. Why did her mother-in-law, who had always been so kind to her, never mention her grandchildren? Alvin and his wife did not realize who was in front of them. Even if they had seen her in a photo with her husband, they would hardly recognize her now, without makeup and styling, modestly dressed. At that moment the phone rang, and Kathy waved goodbye to her new acquaintances. She stepped back to the playground. It was her husband. "Baby, where have you been?" "You're not picking up. I'm worried. Is something wrong?" "I turned off my phone while I was putting the kids to bed. Nothing happened." "Listen, where are you now?" "I'm at work." "I'm gonna be late today. What are your plans for me?" My husband's voice has become quieter and more mysterious. "Yes, I was going to ask you to go out tonight." "Yes," disappointedly stretched the husband. "And I was hoping to spend time alone. Who are you going to see?" "Do I know them?" "I think you do." "It's your brother's family." "No, Brian didn't have time to think before he blurted out the answer. Why not? Kathy was embarrassed by such a quick and abrupt answer. I just saw them. They have such adorable kids. The boy looks just like you. Why would he look like me? Brian realized that his voice might give him away. It was hysterical. He realized that his wife had found out, and why had she come to the orphanage? It was high time to correct her brains and stop this circus with adoption. He did not need children, neither his own, nor even strangers. Why should he? You're his own uncle. Brian breathed a sigh of relief. She doesn't know anything. Did my mother call you today? He asked cautiously, for fear of hearing that she had already told her daughter-in-law about the wonderful idea of adopting a boy who looked remarkably like Brain. Now that scheme, thankfully, could be forgotten. The wife had seen Thomas, which meant she would guess everything. No, should she? Why don't we stop by her place tonight? It's been a while. Kathy was genuinely surprised at the reluctance of her husband's relatives to socialize. Listen, I've got a great idea. Let's have a big family dinner tomorrow. Invite Dad, your parents and your brother, and his family. I mean, we've never met them. It's kind of weird, don't you think? You're brothers, but you haven't seen each other in years. Lisa and I met for the first time today, and we've been related for years. I would love to hang out with your nephews. Thomas is a very handsome boy, and his little sister is adorable. I didn't even get a chance to ask her name. Betty. Her mother says she looks nothing like her brother. Brian noted absently, frantically trying to steer his wife's thoughts in another direction and distract her from the wonderful idea of having her mother, father-in-law, and ex-mistress with an illegitimate child at the same table. Even an eel in a hot frying pan would have a better chance of surviving than him. Yeah, she's a carbon copy of Mommy. Lisa, by the way, is a very beautiful young woman. I would never have guessed she'd have such grown-up kids at such a young age. How old is she? Your age? Baby, I missed you so much. Why don't we just spend the evening together? It's been so long since we've been out. You don't want me to meet your relatives? His wife asked him directly. His mother and his brother's wife have a very strained relationship, and she has never accepted his choice. In addition, the mother is not sure that the daughter to the brother is a relative. Anyway, it's a whole story, and I don't want to involve you and your father in it. He doesn't seem to like me enough as it is. What makes you say that? Dad, on the contrary, is always praising you. But it's one thing to praise you, but it's another to put you in a position of responsibility. You didn't answer, by the way. When are you coming home? Why do I send a driver to pick you up? Okay, I'm waiting. Kathy replied. Again obeying the momentary impulse, Kathy decided to approach her husband's brother's family one more time and get acquainted. The children were still walking in the playground. The parents were sitting on a bench and discussing something very heatedly. Coming closer, the woman heard a phrase. They won't be able to do that. It's not easy to take away a child. Who could think of such a horror, to take children away from their parents? It flashed through my mind. Hello again. I didn't get a chance to introduce myself. I got distracted by the phone call. Good evening. Alvin and Lisa said the same thing. Not quite sure what this woman wanted from them. I'm Kathy, your brother Brian's wife. The woman decided to introduce herself at once. An equally frightened, angry expression appeared on the couple's faces. They looked at each other and practically said in one voice, "You can't take him away. We won't let you." Then the woman rushed to the playground to get the children, and Alvin turned to the uncomprehending Kathy and repeated, "Thomas, we're not giving him to you. He's our son, no matter what his mother does. I don't know what you're talking about. Why are you talking like that? I'm not going to take anyone away from you. I just recognized you and wanted to invite you to visit, to get to know you. We're close relatives, but we've never met in person, so it's strange to me. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to get to know you. I have no ill intentions, I swear to you. Apparently, the woman spoke very convincingly. Alvin looked at his wife and said, the ingenious plan was apparently hidden from her, and suggested, turning to his brother's wife, come on, we'll tell you why we don't communicate with our parents and brother. Surprisingly, the problems brought Alvin and Lisa closer together. He stopped being jealous of her, and she felt great support from her husband. They were now a real family of friends. The conversation took all evening. While Lisa changed clothes and fed the babies, Alvin and Kathy sat in the kitchen. Then her spouse turned on cartoons and joined them. Kathy was horrified by what she heard. Her whole ideal world turned out to be a jumble of lies. Her husband had been lying to her for years, constantly mentoring the enemy, and her mother-in-law, she didn't even want to think about her. Wow, how lucky she was to be stopping near their house today. Despite the horror of the story, she had no reason not to believe it. There was too much evidence, but what struck her most was her mother-in-law's cynicism. She was going to force Kathy to raise a child who had been born to her husband by his mistress. Under the icing of her and Brian's marital happiness, she was going to hide so many broken destinies. She looked at the children who were watching cartoons passionately. Thomas had her husband's profile, his eyes, his hair, the shape of his head. It was amazing how a child could look like a father who had absolutely no use for him. Several times her husband tried to call her. She dropped the calls, and then she turned off the phone altogether. She didn't want to see or hear from anyone, but it was scary to be alone right now. Then she had an idea. Guys, can I stay at your place tonight? I can't go home and I don't want to go to my dad's. Of course you can stay. You are the only ones who told me the whole truth, and we are not strangers now. We have so many secrets in common. The woman smiled sadly and went out to the balcony. She wanted to breathe a little and put her thoughts in order. At that moment there was a knock on the door, or rather, almost knocked it off its hinges. The knocker seemed determined to kick it down. Alvin looked through the peephole and saw his angry brother on the stairs. He opened the door and stepped out, preventing Brian from entering the apartment. Are you crazy to knock like that? We have little kids sleeping. Where's my wife? Brian was clearly concerned. The driver reported that Kathy wasn't at the address, which meant only one thing: she had gone to talk to his brother. The fact that she hadn't picked up the phone in hours only confirmed the hunch. Brian called her father and a couple of friends just in case. She was nowhere to be found, and no one had seen her. After getting her mother's address from her brother, Brian rushed to get his wife. Realizing that today was most likely the last day of his married life, his career and everything that surrounded him, his apartment, his car, his vacation, he had it all only because of his wife. Strangely, he felt no regret now. Lies like a huge layer of snow pressed on him, not allowing him to live normally. Now it would crumble, and what would be left behind was to be seen. We have her, but you better not see her right now. Does she know everything? What does she know? Everything. My brother just said it, and then he went on. That you've been going out on the road. About Thomas being your son. That Mom decided to take him away from us and give him to you. Why did you tell her that? There was no anger in Brian's voice, just a terrible tiredness. Don't you think she deserved it? She really loves you, and she wanted a child from you, not for her own whims. Why are you doing this to her? Why are you all doing this to her? I too, under my mom's influence, didn't notice how hard it was for Lisa all those years, and she put up with it. Do you know what she's been through? I'm glad my mom came up with that horrible adoption plan. It brought us closer together. If you love your wife, fight for her. Apologize, beg, plead. But if you only want her as a means to an end, don't ever go near her again. She's strong. She'll be hurt, painful, sad, but she'll get through it. How do you know all this? You don't know her. You don't know her. We've learned more in a few hours than you have in 7 years. I want to talk to her. She doesn't want to. She's staying with us tonight. If she's ready tomorrow, I'll call you. Does Thomas really look like me? Yes, but if you try to take him away from me or tell me the truth, I'll wipe you out. From the calm confidence with which his brother said those words, Brian realized his mother's plan was doomed to failure beforehand. His brother had become to the boy the best father imaginable. He even felt a pang of jealousy. His son would grow up in front of him with no way of knowing the truth. We reissued the deed to him. Thomas is my son now. I don't even recommend genetic testing. It won't help you. I was initially against the idea that the mother came up with. She seems to have serious problems with her head. I'd show her to a specialist, then show her. I don't want to cross paths with her anymore. With my father, yes, he was very happy when he visited us the other day. He finally met his grandchildren. But she doesn't exist for us anymore. Lisa, she ruined her life for many years, and I was considered an empty place from birth. We have not lost anything. On the contrary, we have gained. My father dared to go against her. If you want, you can come sometimes, but I warn you, if you make any mention of who you are to Thomas. I'm his uncle, and I'm not going to pretend to be anything more than that. That's fine. Apparently, there really is a freak in the family, and it's obviously not you. For the first time in his life, Brian didn't want to be haughty and arrogant with his brother. He suddenly felt jealous. A loving wife, children, a cozy home, even his wife found shelter and comfort here, and he seemed to be his own brother. There was no place here. Too wide, deep gulfs separated them. I'll try to talk to her. Alvin seemed to read his brother's mind. But you shouldn't see each other right now. You should also think hard today about what to do next. Obviously, it won't be like before, but if you don't need her, and you're with her for the money and her father's opportunity, at least be honest with her. You'll be able to achieve everything in life without her father and position. The last phrase my brother said was more for encouragement, but it was the one that echoed in my head all evening and all night. In the morning, Kathy left for a friend's house in the country, not telling anyone but Alvin and Lisa where she was. Her parents had to work late that day, and the children were to be picked up from daycare by their grandmother. Cheerfully pacing the path, the children and Grandma recalled the day's events, shared news, joked and laughed. The second grandmother grew in their path quite unexpectedly. Roughly grabbing the boy by the hand, she tore him to himself, trying to unhook his other hand from his grandmother. "Come here. So let the boy go. He should be somewhere else by now." The woman didn't look very decent, to say the least. "What are you doing?" "Let Thomas go." Lisa's mother began to look around frantically for help. They were only a few meters away from the entrance. At that moment, she saw a woman sitting on a bench in the playground and decided to call for help. "Help! This is crazy. She wants to take the child away." The woman turned in their direction and, as if recognizing her, quickly ran towards them. However, Alvin's mother, upon seeing the woman, quickly changed her expression. "Kathy, daughter, what are you doing here, my good girl? Brain can't find you for 24 hours. Aunt Kathy, you're back. Stay with us again tonight. It's so much fun with you. Hugging the children, unhooking her mother-in-law's hand from the boy's arm, Kathy turned to her husband's relative. And she won't. I filed the divorce papers, packed his things, already took them to your apartment. Your husband didn't even bother to ask what the reason was. What papers? Honey, what kind of joke is this? You two love each other so much. Yes, I did, but your son, the feeling is completely foreign. You don't have to talk to me. I know everything about Brian having a child. The woman looked expressively at the boy, who stood between the two grandmothers and could not understand what was going on. And about the rest of his exploits. It's all of them. It's my no-good Alvin and his philandering wife. They're the ones who turned you against me, against Brian. I'll give it to them. I'll have them on their knees. After these words, the woman suddenly made a terrible grimace, clutched to her heart, and fell down. After a heart attack that left the woman bedridden for almost a year, Alvin and Brian's mother never returned home. She was transferred to a specialized facility with signs of mental illness. Amidst the intense stress, the main factor that affected her mental health was the breakup of her eldest son's family. The former daughter-in-law became a friend for the family of the younger one. She continued to help volunteers, worked as a child psychologist. It was this work that gave her everything she had dreamed of, a loving and loving husband and a little daughter.
Camille was a smart country girl who dreamed of a big city, a good education, and a career. But circumstances were against her. Camille was born into a simple rural family. Her dad, Christopher, was a paramedic on the local farm. Her mom, Nancy, worked as a letter carrier. The village of Barton was small, though picturesque. There was a winding river. There was a deciduous forest nearby. Many houses with carved plate-bands have been preserved in the settlement. It was a pity that many of them stood abandoned. Old people were dying, and young people scattered to the big cities. The work of W. Barton was not much. The main place was a farm. It belonged to a large businessman who owned a network of cattle breeding complexes in the south of Russia. He personally looked into Wagtopa very rarely, although he sometimes made visits. When press tours for journalists were organized to show that the cows were kept clean. There was also a school, a kindergarten, a medical center, and a post office in the village. That's all. Camille has had dreams since childhood of leaving Barton for Kiev. Megapolis becomes a big boss in the beauty industry, works in a skyscraper, drives a cool car, and goes to restaurants. But she's his. She rode only on a bicycle, and sometimes with her father on his old Lada in the city. And instead of restaurants, she had a school canteen. The girl was distinguished by her intelligence and cleverness, was an excellent student at school, liked everyone. For her malleability, she was loved by teachers and peers. Conflicts between them occurred very rarely, only if Camille voiced aloud her dreams of a successful career in the city, and her aloud ridiculed. At such times, the girl fearlessly gave the offenders a rebuff and declared that she will succeed. But a king has been found. Let's see if T.D. Barton will go far. The onions, the seeds, the peers spoke. They themselves made no big plans for the future. The limit of their dreams was to study at a vocational school in the district center, buy an apartment or a house without a current roof, and get a job on a farm, because the pay there was decent by local standards. I understood Camille's ambitions, but there were those who supported Camille and encouraged her. Among them was Molly, her age. The boy lived in the city, but came to the neighboring village to visit his grandmother for the summer. One day they saw Camille and a group of teenagers from different villages who were going to swim in the lake nearby. The girl immediately took a liking to this unlikable boy. He was calm, not fussily silent, and thoughtful. At the same time, he reeked of power. Thanks to this, he immediately earned authority among the locals. Camille was fascinated by Molly, as were many of the other girls. They hung around the city boy and openly picked on him. But Camille was too proud. She pretended that Molly was indifferent to her, although a real fire was raging in her chest at that time. Apparently, it was this feigned indifference that attracted the boy. "What are you reading?" He approached the girl as she sat under a tree reading a book. Other teenagers were buzzing about, noisy crowds splashing in the lake. "Salinger over the rye," in a monosyllabic voice, Camille replied. Her heart rolled frantically at that moment. "Excellent choice," praised Molly. "Did you read it?" Camille asked. "It's an iconic work. I'm surprised it's here." "Someone's reading it," replied the boy. "That sounds arrogant," said Camille. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. It's just that it's the first time I've seen a person with a book in our company." "And with one," Molly explained. "We're country people, but we're literate," Camille joked. "Yes, I understand. I apologize again if I offended you. I've been watching you for a long time." "Is there something special about you?" The guy answered. "Are you hitting on me?" Surprised, asked the girl, who was wildly pleased to hear this from the guy she sympathized with. No, why not?" "I was confused," Molly answered and smiled embarrassedly. As the popular song goes, "Don't be embarrassed," Camille said and was surprised at her boldness. "What do you say?" The boy smiled. "You're from Barton, aren't you?" Yes. "Are you in?" Camille asked. "That's right," answered Molly. "I have a great aunt who lives there. I visit her during the vacations, but I'm from the city." "I see. What do your parents do for a living?" the girl asked. "Mom is a housewife and Dad is a businessman." The boy answered. "What kind of business does he run?" Camille persisted. "I don't really want to talk about it," Molly said. "As you like, I don't insist." The girl shrugged her shoulders and started reading the book again. "What do your parents do for a living?" The boy distracted her. "My mom is a letter carrier and my dad is a veterinary paramedic at the local farm." "Maybe you've heard of it?" Camille asked. "I have." "Sure have," Molly replied and hurried to change the subject. "Do you often come to this lake to swim? Alone?" "Never. Only if we go with friends." "They're not scared here alone," the girl explained. "I see. And sometimes I come alone just to get away from the hustle and bustle," Molly said. "You sound like you're about 40 years old. By the way, how old are you?" Camille asked. "I'm 17, and you?" asked the boy. "We're the same age. I'm 17 too," Camille smiled. "Great. By the way, if you want to come here tomorrow at lunchtime, we'll go for a walk together, we'll swim, we'll discuss books." "I understand you like to read?" asked Molly. "I do," said Camille. "You sure don't see me. You don't have anything so bad on your mind." "How could you think that?" insulted Molly. "You can ask anyone around here. I have a great reputation. I'm a real gentleman, a 17-year-old gentleman." "Sounds like fun," laughed Camille. "Okay, I'll think about your offer. I'll meet you at the same place." "Deal?" Molly said cheerfully. "Now let's go swimming. Because the guys are already looking at us funny, they'll think something wrong. They'll start rumors, and gossip spreads at the speed of light," answered Camille. She pulled off her sundress, remaining in her red swimsuit, and ran to the water. "Watch out, I'll dive." Molly followed her and dived in too. Dropped out. He caught Camille's gaze. She smiled at him. The boy smiled back. Each of them looked forward to the next day. A doubt crept into the girl's mind whether she should go to the lake. The meeting with Molly was tantalizing, but it also held unseen dangers. She wanted to discuss it with someone, but there were no candidates. They weren't close with their parents, and they didn't talk about personal matters. Christopher and Nancy were conservative people, so they were against any romantic encounters. They believed that it was too early for their daughter to go on dates. When she graduates, she'll find herself a nice local boy. The main thing is that he should be a non-drinker and a hard worker. The girl couldn't talk about Molly with her friends because she was afraid of jealousy. The city boy was an enviable groom to whom many local girls made eyes. But he held his ground. In the end, Camille decided to go after conferring with herself. She told her parents that she was going out with her friends, put on her best sundress, let her hair down, and set off on her bicycle. From Barton to the lake was 2 kilometers, the same distance as from Blomfield, only on the other side. During the ride, the girl's heart was pounding frantically, and not just from the fact that she was pedaling very fast. Camille reached her destination 15 minutes ahead of schedule and decided to slow down a bit in the distance. There was a stereotype in her head that decent girls should be late, so she decided to hold off. Meanwhile, she could clearly see that Molly had already arrived and was walking back and forth picking wildflowers while waiting for her acquaintance. After waiting for 20 minutes, Camille walked towards the guy. "I'm sorry I kept you waiting." Played like an actress the scene of Camille's meeting. "That's okay," replied Molly and handed the girl a bouquet. "This is for you, very sweetheart." "Thank you," replied Camille. These were the first flowers that a guy had ever given her. The girl was proud and noticed that a blush appeared on Molly's cheeks. "Shall we bathe first? Or first?" The guy broke the awkward pause. "I would bathe. It's a hot day, so it's a good time for that," Camille answered and started to pull off her sundress. Molly also began to undress. The girl saw how carefully he was looking at her at that moment. But she had nothing to be embarrassed about. She had a nice trim figure and a beautiful swimsuit. At the same time, Camille herself looked so that there were no acquaintances nearby and they were not noticed to avoid rumors. Fortunately, there were few people on the lake during the sun itself, and all of them were strangers. Folks would pull up to the beach closer to evening, when the heat would subside as well. "Well, who's first?" Camille asked, pointing to the water. "Let's go together," Molly suggested. He firmly took the girl's hand and resolutely led her to the shore. They actually entered the water at the same time and started splashing merrily, then headed away from the shore. It turned out that both of them were excellent swimmers. In the middle of the lake, Camille lay on her back and froze on the water. She felt real bliss. "I can't do that," Molly told her. "You will. You just have to relax and let go as much as possible, and then everything will work out. Try it," advised Camille. Molly tried to follow the girl's recommendation, but he failed. He went down. "Okay, I guess it's not my thing. I'm not in the habit of relaxing. My father says you have to keep your grip on yourself at all times and not slack off." "Grip," he explained, upset the guy. "But you have to be able to relax," Camille said. "That's probably why I like to spend time in the countryside. There is no fuss, no hurry. It's a different rhythm. And my father doesn't torment me with constant activity like he does at home." Molly smiled. "Ha ha, I'd love to do that. It's nice to be in such serenity for a month or two. And then you get tired of it. You want activity, but you can't find it in the village," Camille said sadly and dived in. "Dive in?" She heard Molly's question. "You're not going to live here all your life, are you? Are you going to come to town after school?" "I want to, but I'm not sure I can. My parents want me to stay here. Marry some local guy, have kids, get a job," Camille said. "Where do you work here?" Molly wondered. "On the farm." "Where else is there money to be made?" "The boss pays well," said Camille. "I'm Senko," the boy said and hurried to change the subject. "And if you do manage to go to the city, what would you like to become?" "In general, I'm interested in beauty. I would like to become a hairdresser or a manicurist, but so unusual, which makes his work for a tick, and the most advanced, who follows the trends, and ideally open your own salon," Camille said dreamily. "Aren't such workers needed here? You have to cut hair and do nails everywhere?" Molly was surprised. "What are you talking about? It's strange to compare. Here they do a maximum of brown hair and cut it to zero. Men also have nothing interesting with their nails." Camille said sadly. "I understand why you want to work in beauty, because you are the most beautiful," Molly said and smiled. Was Camille reflected in Barton, Oregon and Blomfield? "All over the world," answered Molly. He accelerated sharply and breaststroked to the shore, shouting to his buddy to catch up. At that moment, Camille felt as if she had grown wings. No one had ever said such words to her before, though she herself was well aware of her attractiveness. Blue eyes, long blonde hair, a slim figure like a ballerina. She stood out among the local girls, blood and milk, but her parents, on the contrary, were as if embarrassed by their daughter's aristocratic appearance and her differentness. And in whom did she come from? A peasant family? Father asked sometimes. Nancy kept silent at these moments, though her grandfather's stories about being the illegitimate son of a local shepherdess and a nobleman came to her mind. Her parents would have liked Camille to be as knocked down and strong as everyone else. And Christopher and Nancy generally thought that looks were the 10th thing. It's all about having a daughter, a worker. And the nose didn't hold up. Coming ashore, Camille noticed that a company of her acquaintances from Barton was approaching the lake. "Let's get out of here," She hurried Molly and pulled on her sundress in a hurry. "What's wrong?" the boy asked in surprise. "No time to explain," said Camille. Jumping on her bike and setting off, Molly hurriedly pulled on a t-shirt and hurried after her friend. Together they rode deeper into the forest. The forest coolness saved them from the heat and prying eyes. Kitchen. "We're safe now," Camille exhaled. "I get it. Are you afraid of gossip?" asked Molly. "I'm not afraid of anything," shouted the girl. "But I don't want any more trouble." "Okay," said the boy. The young people got off their bikes and went for a walk. Camille was telling her friend about the plants that grow in the forest. She had known them since childhood. At this time, the girl was very enthusiastic and happy. She had always loved solitude, but sometimes she lacked a soulmate nearby, and she found one in Molly. He listened attentively to Camille, asked clarifying questions, joked and smiled. "But why are we always talking about me? Tell me more about yourself. What do you dream of becoming?" the girl asked. Molly answered, one syllable. "A fashionable profession with money," smiled Camille. "Yes, it is. But I'm not in it for that. I'm really interested, and I'm good at it. I even took part in Olympiads and won prizes," Molly said proudly. "Very cool," sincerely admired Camille. "Your parents must be terribly proud of you?" "Not really," Molly blushed sharply. "My mom's into herself. She has fitness, yoga, beauty salons. Dad's all about business, always traveling, business trips. He's rarely home. Sometimes it seems to me that we are randomly gathered under one roof, people who feel nothing for each other. Not exactly the best role model," Camille grinned. "That's probably why you don't want a family at all." "Why not?" "On the contrary," Molly declared. "I just want to marry for love and build a family in a smart way, not like my father. He married my mom because she was the daughter of rich parents with a good inheritance. There were no feelings between them from the beginning. That's why the family was like that." "No one really wants that," Camille said sadly. "I don't know what to say to that." "There's nothing to say," Molly said. He stopped, took Camille's hands in his, and looked into her eyes. Sometimes words are unnecessary. Then he kissed her in a way that made her eyes darken. "I like you very much," said, locking lips with Molly. Let's go out." Instantly agreed Camille. The romance developed rapidly. In many ways, the guys were driven by the fact that they had little time. There was less than a month until the end of the vacation. Guy and girl tried very hard to hide their relationship from others, but it is not easy to do in the village. And soon about the affair, Camille and Molly knew almost all the locals, in particular, the parents of the girl. Father and mother were not delighted, but did not interfere with the daughter, which was very surprising. Nothing, "Let the girl walk," sang let out. All the same, this signal in a couple of weeks already smells to his city, and she will forget it as a drink, reasoned Christopher. Molly really left after 14 days after a series of romantic walks, swimming in the river and lake, dozens of bouquets of wildflowers. At parting, Camille even stumbled a little, but the guy hurried to comfort her. "Don't be sad, sweetheart. Everything will be all right. We'll see each other again. I'll come during the fall break, and then, a year later, when we finish school, you'll come to town, and no one will stop us from being together." Camille smiled and clung to her fiancé. "Okay, I believe you. Let it be so." Autumn had come. The bright country summer was replaced by gray, dull days. Camille was sad and missed Molly very much. He called and texted her all the time, but this was no substitute for live communication. The fall vacations began. But the guy did not come. He told her that he was skateboarding. "I landed and broke my leg. Do you want to come to my town?" he offered Camille. "What are you saying? My parents won't let me go." "And where would we live?" The girl was surprised. "That's right too," Molly wisely reasoned. A new series of expectations for the winter vacation began. But Molly didn't come again. "Look, it's not my fault. There's a programming Olympiad in China right now. I have to go. You remember how important this is to me. If we win, I'll get a ticket to life," the guy enthusiastically told her into the phone. This time, however, he was met by Camille's indifferent silence. She had less and less faith in the groom. In addition, Her friends viciously convinced her that he just played with her in the summer and left her. He had plenty of other girls in town who were no match for Camille. Parents said pretty much the same thing, just in slightly different words. Eventually, the girl believed these beliefs and announced to Molly that they were breaking up. He resisted and told her not to listen to envious people, that they would definitely be together. It is only necessary to be patient. But the girl was adamant. She regarded Molly's behavior as a betrayal and did not want to hear more about him. Distracted from the first love helped to prepare for the final exams. This process took a lot of time and effort. Camille still did not give up hope to enter a university and go to the city. There she would go to a hairdressing course and fulfill her dream. As a result, she got the highest scores among her classmates. These results quite allowed her to pass on the budget, but her parents were categorically against it. No city, no university. You've already used a city major, and there's tons of them out there. I'm worried about you, silly. Stay here, go to the local technical school in the district center, and you study. And then we'll see, my father said like a cutoff. Besides, the mother has become a bad TV. You'll see, they'll give you disability. What will we live on? How will we manage the household? We have chickens, a vegetable garden. Who's going to help if you're our only child? Camille had no choice but to submit to her parents' will. She cried into her pillow for several nights, but then she obeyed fate and enrolled in the local agrarian technical school to become a veterinary paramedic. She decided to follow in her father's footsteps. It's the exact opposite of what I dreamed of. Raised a girl. Her classmates were good people, but she had absolutely nothing to talk to them about. She was interested in literature, art house movies, and Western music. Her classmates didn't read books at all, watched stupid comedies, and listened to vulgar love songs or meaningless Russian rap. The girl immersed herself in her studies. If life left her no choice, it means that it is necessary to become a really good specialist. She listened attentively to teachers, showed diligence in practice. In the evenings in the fall, she helped her parents on the plot, and in the winter, when the household chores were less and there was nowhere to entertain, locked herself in her room and read books. She never got over Molly at night. Sometimes she would revisit their photos together, reread the tenderness-filled correspondence, and cry. Sometimes she'd even break through to call her ex-boyfriend, but something would stop her at the last moment. Neither he nor she actively maintained social networks, did not post personal photos, so they could not follow the events of each other's lives. In the spring, Camille realized that it was necessary to give at least one of her numerous suitors a chance. She agreed to go on a date with a classmate. He seemed to her quite handsome and not the most stupid, so he stood out favorably against the others. The guy invited Camille to go for a ride in a car and then sit in the only cafe in the district center. She agreed. In the salon, he loudly turned on Russian rap music. The girl didn't like it immediately, as well as the fact that the suitor was chewing gum. In addition, he one after another gave out stupid, vulgar jokes. On the way to the cafe, Camille realized that she had agreed to this rendezvous for nothing. She told the guy that she had a headache and asked him to take her home. But how? You know, right now in a minute, yes, more. The young man rolled down his window and spit out his gum with relish. Back home, Camille cried. I wish I hadn't gone out at all. Otherwise I would disappoint you men completely, she said to herself. That evening she decided to call Molly. With trembling fingers, she dialed his number. Her heart raced. She waited to hear her favorite voice, but heard only a mechanical answering machine. The subscriber's machine was switched off or out of range. But then, so be it, Camille said with a sad smile and threw the phone away. That night she decided that she no longer believed in love and would never look for it again. She realized that the best option was to become the girl she deep down despised, the one who views men as moneybags and scowls at them, sits on their necks, and lives beautifully at someone else's expense. The decision was a painful one. Camille was well aware that she was making it out of anger and resentment, but she did not want to change anything. However, the problem was that there were no such men in her surroundings, and to look for them in Barton Keller District Center would be foolish. But the girl did not despair. She decided that she would fulfill her parents' will and get an education in the village, but when she got a diploma, she would fulfill her long-standing dream and move to the city. There she was going to get a job in an elite veterinary clinic and treat pedigree cats and dogs of rich owners. If she could find a suitable candidate for her heart with a fat purse. Camille did not share her thoughts with anyone, but her demeanor had changed markedly. She became more aloof, cold, and even arrogant. Her parents didn't pay much attention to it. Between them there had never been a warm, trusting relationship. The daughter continued to help them in the household and diligently studied. That was enough for them, to understand her mood swings, her mental worries. They had no intention of dealing with her mood swings. Meanwhile, Camille decided to start training what they thought were men. It was a skill that would come in handy in the future. She didn't even consider peers. Her first target was the owner of a plumbing store in the district center of John, a local rich man. By the standards of the girl, he was not so old, only 36 years old, handsome enough, and most importantly, well-to-do. After classes at the technical school, Camille now and then began to visit the store under the pretext that her parents are going to make repairs in the bathroom. And she allegedly, at their request, to look for the necessary goods and price. In fact, there was no question of any renovation. Just John himself often consulted buyers, and it was a great excuse to get acquainted with him. The girl was pussyfooting around, asking stupid questions about the guards and flapping her eyelashes expressively. John could not help but give in. He was fascinated by Camille. But because he was a groupie by nature, he didn't want to be. The son didn't know how to approach the girl, so he did what he knew how to do. First, he gave the girl the most expensive faucet in his store. "Here you go, Camille, this one's a present. It's a great faucet with a nose and no nose. Your parents will appreciate it. You don't have to pay, it's a gift from the house," John said, blushing. Camille accepted the gift and acted delighted, although she was horrified to think what she would do with this thing. The way out was found quickly. The girl resold the faucet over the internet, getting a decent sum for it. John did not cheat. The faucet was indeed expensive. Step by step I frowned. John definitively did. When Camille was a sophomore in high school, they began dating. By New Year's Eve, John proposed to his sweetheart that she move in with him. The man had a nice house in the neighborhood center. Camille informed her parents about it. Rick was proud. One of the local rich men was interested in his daughter, but he didn't agree right away. "I wish you'd get married, but it's not very human. You're all so young and precocious. But John is a solid, serious man. I trust him. And he's looking at you with loving eyes, hoping to marry you in the summer. All right, I'll let you move in with him, but on one condition: that you don't forget us, that you come and help out on weekends," I said. Sure. Daddy, thank you for that." Camille smiled. She wasn't really going to be traveling to Barton that often, so she talked John into fixing up the bathroom in her parents' house. He agreed. The parents were pleased and stopped demanding frequent visits from their daughter. John and Camille lived together for the rest of the winter and spring. They had a good time. The man idolized his chosen one and was really going to propose to her. She did not have romantic feelings for her roommate, but she had respect for him. Camille was not going to marry John. For her, it was a test option, very convenient, before she graduated from technical school. However, Camille had to return to Wagtop for the summer, and the girl was sent to the local farm. It was not easy to get there. The place was considered good. Besides, the students were paid well for their work, so only the best students were sent there. At first, the girl was upset, but then she looked at the situation from a different angle. She would earn money and become more independent. Besides, she would get a break from John, whose worries seemed more and more intrusive. "You don't have a job yet? Your first job?" Miranda asked her in a protective voice. Camille nodded silently. "Well, it's a start, I guess. Your first entry will be doyarka. That's real in Russia," the woman said, noticing how the student looked. "It's only an entry in the book, but in reality, everything is very modern. We have a lot of equipment, everything is clean, sterile, and the work is even honorable." Camille didn't answer her, but she didn't change her opinion about the not the most pleasant entries in her work record. But she didn't have to choose. She coped with her work with dignity, without disliking or disgusting the cows. She carried out all the instructions purely mechanically, and she was good at it. In July, the owner, Stephen Barnett, came to the farm to inspect it. The man was in his early 40s. He was in great shape and had a flamboyant charisma. That's the kind of man I'd like to see in the future, Camille said to herself. During his rounds, which were conducted for him by Miranda, Stephen smiled at the staff in 32 long teeth, was friendly and joked a lot. And this is our intern. Camille has been working for us for the second month, showing progress, the woman said, walking up to Camille's workstation. She knew that the owner would come to the farm today, so she did her trademark makeup, which did not make anyone indifferent. Good afternoon. I've heard good things about you. Nice to meet you, sweetheart. The girl smiled and fluttered her eyelashes. Nice to meet you. Stephen smiled even wider. Well, as long as they show outstanding results, why not give awards, Miranda? What do you say, Stephen? The woman laughed slightly, for the first time encountering such generosity of her host. That's what I say. I say give a prize to a young talent, he said cheerfully, noticing Miranda's slanted glance. And then he added, and to himself too. You right, of course. All who witnessed the scene realized that Stephen had lost his head for Camille. Camille realized it too. The only thing left to do was to wait for their chance encounter and act. The girl noticed that Stephen left the farm at the same time every day and set it up so that she too left work at the same hour, having asked the management in advance. Before going out, she disbanded her hair and changed into dresses favorably emphasizing the curves of her figure. Then, it was just a matter of waiting. Camille, good afternoon. You look beautiful, said Stephen. He slowed down in front of the girl. Oh, Stephen, I didn't notice you. Camille was playing the scene. Such a surprise. It's good to see you. How have you been? I've been good, and when you met a girl like that, it was great not to let you down, asked the businesswoman. I'd be very grateful to you. I just had to get to the district center, smiled Camille. Sat in the SUV of the businessman and gracefully ogled the knee of the way the driver could not tear away from him. Look, and Camille thought you were all the way there. I'd invite you out, but I'm afraid there's nowhere to go, and rumors might creep in, said Stephen in the district center. Oh yes, there's nowhere to go in the countryside, you're right, Camille said sadly. It's like in the city. I agree with you. In fact, I'm going there this weekend. Perhaps you could keep me company, the businessman asked politely. Camille clapped her hands with pleasure. Great. Then I'll pick you up. Where do you live? Asked Stephen. Better not by the house. How about by the stadium? Asked the girl. Deal. Stephen said cheerfully. The man and the girl said goodbye. Camille went to the lingerie store. She clearly needed a new seductive set. The next day at work, she was called up by Miranda. Camille, this is none of my business. But did you seriously think you'd be making love to the petty officer? He's a married man. Come on, think of yourself. He'll play around and then he'll quit. And then you'll be heartbroken and swallow tears. That's how it works. The girl tried to talk sense into the boss. I've already broken all the tears. I don't pay for men anymore. Thank you for your advice, Miranda, but I'll take care of it myself. Camille replied cheekily and went back to her workplace. Fire girl. The boss shouted after her. The weekend came. Camille told her parents that she was going to visit John and John, that she would stay at her parents' house, and she went to the city with Stephen. On the way, they immediately switched to you and began to flirt openly. In the city, the businessman took the girl to a restaurant. They ended the evening at his apartment. Isn't the wife coming in? Asked Camille from passionately kissing her neck Stephen. No, she doesn't know about this apartment, breathing, said the man. Oh, you mean? Playfully said Camille, and led him towards the bedroom. The whole next day they did not live in bed. Toward evening, the entrepreneur took his young girlfriend shopping and then drove her to his barton. On the way, Camille sadly told him how hard it was for her to work, how tired she was, and that she deserved more. Did you know that your internship ends tomorrow? Are you really a doll and not a milkmaid? Will you go to live in the apartment where we were today? Asked Stephen. Camille let out a tear of joy to make sure. Of course, I would do anything to be closer to you. Thank you, you're my hero, said the milkmaid. Barnett kept his word, and the very next day agreed with Miranda that Camille would no longer go to the farm. She'd be suspended from her apprenticeship. She's 20 years old, and she's already spinning men like a smitten bitch, her co-worker said to the woman. Miranda just shook her head and said, Let's go to work. I'm not used to this kind of life. I'm used to carrying everything on my own back and not waiting for handouts from anyone. But my conscience does not bother me and I sleep well, she explained to her friend. Meanwhile, Camille had two things to settle: to break with John and to inform her parents about her move to the city. The first item was not a problem for the girl, although she felt a little sorry for the former roommate because he sincerely loved her. You're very good, John, aren't you? But you and I are completely different. Believe me, it's better for both of us, the girl said tenderly at that moment. Feeling guilty, John did not hold back his emotions and cried. I can't hold you, but I will always love you, he said, and covered his face with his hands. Camille kissed him on the top of his head, gathered the rest of his belongings from the house and left. The conversation with her parents promised to be more difficult. The girl knew that in their eyes John was the ideal candidate for her husband. They did not trust men of Stephen's level. Nevertheless, Camille firmly decided that she would no longer allow herself to be manipulated and decide for herself. Mom, Dad, I'm going to live in the city, she announced firmly to her family. So people were telling the truth, and I thought they were spreading rumors. Cheers. Nancy wailed. Wait, Mother. Father entered the conversation. And where are you pouring out to us? What other town? Don't they sleep with him? Camille answered proudly, although her knees were shaking at that moment. Yes, Mother, you're right. We have not raised an honest man but a rich man's doormat, said Christopher. So, you're not going anywhere. You're staying here. You won't go out again until you think. Did they give you brains? It's a beautiful life. If you want it, you want it. Cheers. I sobbed back in Camille, who were famous very early. I'm not going to be a milkmaid like you. And Barnett? He's in love with me. Today with you, tomorrow with someone else. He'll change you like a glove. Is that what you want? In fact, he's in love. What about you? Do you feel anything for him? Christopher went on. Yeah, that's what I want. I want to live a normal life for a little while. And about love, I don't believe in it anymore. I don't want to love myself. Camille's screaming was too painful. Sweetheart, darling, you've got it all ahead of you. John, he's so good. The mother wailed. I don't want to have porridge with Stephen. And you're not the boss of me, Camille said and ran out of the house with her suitcase. On the street, she turned around and saw in the window the sad and disappointed eyes of her father. He did not run out and hold his daughter by force, but this look hurt the girl even more. However, Stephen was already waiting for her outside the stadium in his big car. How did it go? He asked and kissed her. It was fine, answered Camille, who managed to hide the traces of tears. They promised a little, but they let her go. What's in it for them? Of course, my love, to the restaurant. Stephen called back and added Gaza. Camille laughed in response, though a cat squeaked in her soul. The businessman really put her in a secret apartment and bought there everything that the girl herself wanted. In the dwelling appeared a treadmill, a large closet, a pile of new clothes and cosmetics. Camille felt like a fairy tale princess. Stephen did not visit her every day. After all, he was a married man. This fact did not embarrass the girl. She did not claim his hand. She was quite satisfied with the bohemian life she led now. The man was reluctant to talk about his family. And yet Camille was concerned about the question. Kotika, how is your wife? Don't you love her at all? She asked the businessman while giving him a massage. I don't love the stutterer. She's a good woman, but there were never any feelings between us. I don't hide the fact that I married her because of my father-in-law's rich father. He's still alive to this day. Tough guy Jack. Actually, he owns the whole network of farms in the south of Russia, and I'm his deputy. That's why my wife and I don't divorce. Everyone understands, but we've long since gotten used to it. I do not bring women into our apartment, make my wife gifts, behave with her politely and courteously. She responds to me in the same way. That's all, Stephen explained. Do you have children? Camille asked. A son? But he's all grown up. Studying abroad without much love, said the businessman. I wonder what he's studying for, asked the girl, a programmer. He's been interested in computers since childhood. But that's it. I propose to close this topic. Besides, we have more interesting things to do, answered Stephen and kissed Camille. She didn't resist. At the beginning of autumn, the girl realized that she was pregnant. It came as a complete surprise to her. She did not plan to keep Stephen in this way and was afraid that he would leave her after learning about the baby. But no, Stephen turned out to be even glad. That's great. I love children. Besides, I had my eldest son when I was very young and busy with my career, so I didn't have time for him. He was raised by his mother. That's why my relationship with him was strained. It was like we were strangers. But now I've matured into conscious parenthood, and I'd love to take care of my son. We're having a son. You don't know yet? Asked the entrepreneur. Son, that's right, answered Camille. The due date was coming up. Well, that's good. We'll name him after my father, Robert. But I can't marry you, you know. But it's all such a formality, especially nowadays. I won't leave you. I'll take care of all the expenses. I'll visit you here regularly. So, Kitty, everything will be fine. Have a happy baby, Stephen reassured her. Camille exhaled and began to enjoy motherhood. She abandoned her studies at the technical college while she waited for the baby. She enrolled in a manicure course. She decided to fulfill her teenage dream. Stephen paid for the class. The man did not deceive and in everything supported the passion throughout the pregnancy, so the word flowed very easily. Camille thought for a long time whether to tell her parents about it or not. In the end, she decided and called her father. But you have someone to look after you. What do you want from us? The father said brutally. Nothing, answered Camille and hung up the phone and cried. At the end of March, the girl gave birth to a strong boy weighing 5 kilograms. A real big boy, said the nurse, handing the baby to the father. He was radiant with joy and pride. Camille was happy too, although she would have liked her mother to be with her on such an important day. But it turned out as it did. The girl had long ago accustomed herself to be guided by circumstances. Stephen took the beloved newborn Robert to the apartment, covered with flowers and blue balloons. The parents had thoughtfully bought all the necessary things: stroller, crib, diapers. Beforehand, Camille was a little frightened by the new status. Besides, she had no one to consult with. Stephen spent a lot of time with his lawful wife, but she had no choice. I had to adapt and get used to it. Nowadays, you can find a lot of necessary information on the internet. The girl did not get any incredible pleasure from motherhood. All the same, she gave birth to a child early, did not walk in her, and properly not enjoying her youth. Nevertheless, it was quite interesting for her to take care of little Robert. Fortunately, he turned out to be a quiet and obedient boy. He ate and slept, and rarely cried out. His health was great. Camille did not worry about finances. Stephen provided for them completely. The only thing is that there are girls who grew up in nature. It was stuffy in the village. It's in a stone jungle. If earlier she was more mobile and could go out, now it was problematic to do it with a small child. The girl voiced her worries to the child's father. What's the problem? I have a country house. Let me take you and Robert there for the summer, said Stephen. And your wife will not come there? Camille asked cautiously. With the baby, she had become more vulnerable and more wary of such things. No, she's going to the sea for the summer. Our latitudes don't appeal to her. So don't worry, Stephen said and hugged his beloved. A week later, the man took Camille and little Robert to his luxurious suburban mansion. Well, are you alive? Here's space, silence, and fresh air, all you need for happiness, said the businessman. But we Sviatenko for complete happiness need you too, to sweeten your anger towards him. Camille, my baby, I will come to visit you on weekends, Stephen answered her. Honey, but your wife's going to the seaside. What prevents you from visiting us more often? The young mother asked her nomadic son. You know very well that I have a lot of work. Stephen said in a steely tone that did not tolerate any objections. Camille wisely did not contradict him, but she wondered whether she was his only lover. Even before she was pregnant, and in the early stages of her pregnancy, she was sure Stephen had no one else. But as her belly began to grow, she had her doubts. The man was still funding Camille, but meetings with her became more infrequent. The girl was not so much jealous, because she had never really loved Stephen, as she was afraid for her future and the future of her son. Whereas before, the thought of being alone had not frightened her. She was young, beautiful, free, but now there was cause for concern. After childbirth, her figure had blurred a little, and the presence of a child made her less mobile, less attractive in the eyes of other men. In addition, on the heels of stepped-on even younger competitors, therefore Camille had to keep her ear to the ground, but at the same time do not put a lot of pressure on the man, so that he did not run away first or did not put her and her son on the street. And knowing Stephen's fiery temperament, such a thing was quite possible. Gradually, Camille was getting used to the role of a mother and her young rural lifestyle, but in complete comfort. Everything was quite all right. But the girl was still troubled by the lack of communication with her parents. She understood that her father was strongly opposed to communication with his daughter, but there was still the mother. Nancy, though not particularly sentimental, still loved her daughter. Camille wrote to her mother and invited her to visit. At her own risk, the woman lied to her husband that she was going to visit her sister for a week. She arrived at her daughter's house. Seeing the little grandchild, she cried and handed him modest gifts, 2 rattles, a suit for growing up, and plush dogs. "Oh, of course, with your luxuries. With yours, my gifts are of no use to you." In embarrassment, looking at the mansion, said Nancy. "Mother, what are you saying? You've brought wonderful gifts. Thank you for them," Camille said and hugged her mother. She knew that even this modest set had cost the woman with the letter carrier's small salary a lot of money. This was the happiest week for Camille in the last year. Nancy was happy to be away from her grandson and to help her daughter with everything. She exhaled. The house was idyllic. The daughter settled in. "Of course you're well, I can't tell you. It's expensive, it's rich. Robert has everything. I see that Stephen doesn't hurt you, or you're invisible. That's good, but I see that your heart is not in the right place. You don't like Stephen, do you?" Mother asked. "Do you?" Without even trying to lie, Camille replied. "So what's the point of all this? Your eyes aren't burning. Why did you rush into it when you were having an affair with him? You're so young and beautiful." "I understand I wanted a beautiful life. But you could have found it, even if it wasn't as luxurious, but with a man you love. Maybe you should have waited a little longer and not shown me." "Norov?" Nancy asked affectionately. Camille cried and for a long time did not answer. But then she calmed down and said, "You know, Mother, I've become like that out of resentment toward Molly. I really loved him then, with all my soul. And he left me, since he didn't come twice. Probably decided not to get involved with a country girl. So I decided that I'll show all the men what this country girl is. And so I did. Of course, the way I am now, it's a mask. But I'm used to it. It's quite comfortable. It's a little tight in places, of course, and overbearing. But the pluses still outweigh it. And Stephen, though I don't like it, I feel good about it. And after all, he's my father, my baby." Camille shared her feelings frankly. Nancy just sighed and hugged her daughter and kissed her on the top of her head. "Father, even though your heart is still on it, he still loves you and is worried about it." "I know that," she said, "and for Koshelev." "Mother, what's the matter with you?" Camille asked, frightened. "It's nothing, my dear. Something's wrong with my lungs," the mother replied. "Let's go to the doctor tomorrow," suggested the daughter. "No, honey, I have to go home. We've got cucumbers. We have to close the jars." "I'll go to the doctor at my place," said Nancy and went to bed. The next day she left. The aimlessly lonely days dragged on again for Camille. Out of boredom, she continued to watch instructional videos on the monitor, hoping that someday she would open her own salon. Stephen had even mentioned that when Robert grew up, he would give her some money for it. August had replaced July. The days were getting shorter, the nights longer. The air was beginning to smell. In the fall, Stephen began to come less and less often. During one of his visits, Camille noticed lipstick marks on the collar of his shirt and was finally convinced that the man had a mistress. So what if he cheated on his wife? Who said he wouldn't cheat on his mistress? Camille thought with a little sadness. But she pretended not to notice. Her life at the mansion was monotonous. There were no guests except Stephen's mother until one day at the very end of summer. Camille was cooking in the kitchen. Robert sat nearby in a high chair and shook a rattle given by his grandmother. The door to the house was open. The girl was used to the fact that the cottage community was always quiet and there was no one to be afraid of. However, suddenly she heard some noise in the yard, went to the window, and saw a male silhouette. Frightened, that it was a thief who had entered their plot. Camille grabbed Robert and ran with him into the pantry. The thief took cautious steps into the house. The girl watched him through a slit and prayed that her son would not cry and give them away. The man's face was hard to see behind the hood, but he appeared to be young, or more likely it was a boy. The young man slowly made his way down the hallway, walked into the kitchen and saw food on the stove. "Hey, is anyone here?" shouted the guy loudly. Camille froze. She knew that voice very well. At that moment, Robert cried loudly. The young man went to scream and cautiously opened the door to the pantry. Camille, clutching her son to her chest, she knew who she would see, but she was still surprised by Molly. "Emile." The boy was equally confused. "What are you doing there?" Both of them blurted out with glee. "I live here, first." Camille reacted. "That's fine, but why do you live in my house?" asked Molly. "What do you mean?" "In yours," Camille's eyes rounded. "More precisely, in my family's house," the boy explained. "So Stephen is your father?" The girl marveled. "If you mean Stephen Wagpet, he is my father, and I am his only son," Molly replied. "Not the only one anymore." Camille answered and looked at Robert lying in her arms. "This baby is my father's son?" The boy was surprised. Camille nodded silently. "And you, moonlighting is what? Babysitting?" asked Molly. "No." Camille hesitated and continued after a pause. "I'm the mother of this boy. His name is Robert, by the way." Molly clutched his head. "This is surreal. I think I'm dreaming," he said. "No, you're not, unfortunately," replied Camille. "Okay, I'm going to get some air and then I'll come back and you can tell me all about it," Molly said and went out into the garden. Camille saw the guy smoking. He came back 15 minutes later with Joroshenko and restless. "Right, but I'm waiting for your explanations," he said. Camille detailed to the former lover the history of relations with his father. Molly listened attentively to the girl and did not interrupt her. "Now, Robert and I have been living in this house for 3 months. That's the story," finished the girl. "I'll be right back," said Molly and went out for a smoke again. When he came back, Camille asked him, "What are you doing here?" "Stephen told me you were studying abroad." "I am." "At least he didn't lie about that." "You're a bad liar," Molly said angrily. "But now I'm on a mini vacation in the city. I'm bored. I decided to come to the house for a couple of days to breathe in the nature." "Why no girlfriend?" I cautiously decided to inquire about Camille's ex-lover's situation. "What girl?" "I don't have one. I'm lonely," Molly said. And after a while he continued to be honest. "I haven't had anyone since you, as a matter of fact. I went out with girls a couple of times, but I quickly realized it wasn't for me. And not to mess with Ksenia's head, I could have forgotten you. So why then in your time you did not come to the village?" With resentment asked Camille. "I couldn't, could I? I was 17. I hadn't got my license yet, and it was very inconvenient to get to you by train. And my father wouldn't let me go. And then, the Olympics in China. I won it, which is why I'm studying in China now. I wanted to come visit you when I got back. I turned 18 in March. I thought I'd get my license and fly straight to you. But I didn't. You turned out to be a hot girl and didn't even want to listen to me. So now we have what we have. So you're my little brother's mother?" Interesting story, of course, summarized with a sad smile, Molly. "Why do you and your father have different last names? He's Barnett and you're Otis. I never even realized you two were related." Camille voiced the question that came to mind. "Because I despise him," Molly replied sharply. "Even my mom didn't take his last name. She kept hers from her grandfather. So I followed in his footsteps." "It's simple. It's clear," Camille said bitterly. "The matter is clear. That the matter is dark," replied Molly. "All right, I'll get out of your way. I'm going back. Why don't you stay? As far as I understand, you did not come to the raid by car. The trains are bad. How will you get back?" Camille asked. "I wouldn't want to stay here for obvious reasons, but there's logic in what you say. It would be difficult for me to get to the city now, so I think I'll stay. But I won't bother you. I'll take the upstairs guest room and sit there quietly until morning, and then I'll leave on the first train," Molly explained. "Good." Camille was genuinely pleased. She put Robert to bed and knocked on the guest's room. "Why don't we go sit in the garden gazebo?" "You've come to get some fresh air, haven't you?" Camille invited him in. "What about your son?" Molly asked. "He's already asleep," the girl replied. The guy silently got out of bed and followed Camille. The girl played tea from the herbs she had gathered during the summer in the local meadow and brought jam from cherries, which she had twisted together with her mother. At first, Camille thought that they would not be able to find a common language with Molly, as they had both changed over the years. But in the end, the conversation went smoothly, just as it had 4 years ago. The girl's heart lit up and revitalized. She was both pleased and frightened by this forgotten feeling. She noticed that it felt good in Molly. The stars already showed in the sky, and the guy and the girl kept talking in plaid. "I guess we should go," Camille said, realizing that she was too cold. "As sad as it is, you are right," Molly replied. The young people walked slowly towards the house. At the threshold, the boy stopped and pointed to the sky. "Remember how that summer we liked to look at the stars, to look for falling stars, to make wishes?" Molly asked dreamily. "Of course I remember," answered Camille sadly. "Did yours come true?" asked the boy. Camille lowered her eyes and shrugged. "Mine didn't. Actually, I had only one wish to be with you," said Molly sadly. At that moment, Camille looked up and kissed Molly. Then she pushed him away. "Silly me, what am I doing? We're not allowed." She said it by ear. "You're right." Molly echoed her, cheeks flushed. "And yet." The boy held Camille tightly and kissed her passionately. That night they spent together. Camille had never experienced such bliss. She remembered everything she had dreamed of in her youth and came back to her real self. She woke up at dawn, but Molly was no longer in the house. On the table she found a note from him: "Goodbye, the main love of my life. I don't want to stop you from building your life. It's the path you've chosen. Good luck to you. Take care of my little brother," the message said. Camille cried, but quickly got her senses in order because it was time to feed little Robert. Molly was right. It was too late to replay everything already, as if sensing something amiss. A couple days later, Stephen arrived at the cottage. Camille was afraid that Molly had told him everything, but with the help of leading questions, she learned that the man knew nothing. Stephen was unaccustomedly silent and not affectionate. "Oh, honey, I think we should cut back a little bit. You're just staying home for now anyway. You don't need so many outfits for shopping. I'll give you less. Oh, and remember, I promised you a new cell phone. I read the reviews. This model is even worse than the last one you have now. So we'll postpone that purchase too," the man said, "as you see fit." "Dear," Camille replied. She was not frightened by the prospect of being without new shoes, gadgets. But the very tone of the conversation and the fact that Stephen had started to save money on her made her think that he had probably started to spend more money on his mistress. The man left that afternoon, leaving Camille alone with her young son, and the reflection did not leave Molly's mind. Maybe he was right, and it was not necessary then to get hot and so hastily break off relations with him. But history, as we know, has no subjunctive mood. She carried the pillow from the guest bedroom into her room, laid it beside her, and sighed with delight. The smell of Molly was still lingering. A week later, however, the boy unexpectedly came to the cottage again. "Camille, you can't go on like this. I love you and I can't live without you. We've already wasted so many years because of stupidity. But I don't intend to waste another day. Will you agree to move in with me? Yes, I'm not as rich as my father, but I'm already working part-time at this firm, with a good income. I'm sure it'll be even better in the future. How do you see it?" he asked. "But what about it?" "Robert?" Camille asked, confused. "We'll take him with us. I'll raise him. Maybe in the future we will tell him the whole truth. Maybe not," Molly explained. "Where will we live?" "You're studying abroad, aren't you?" Camille asked. "Just this week I was looking into it, and I found out that I could transfer to a distance learning program. I don't have much time left. As long as we live in my apartment, Grandpa bought it for me when I was a kid. And then, when I've got my degree and Robert's grown up, I think we'll move to the US and make a real life for ourselves. Wouldn't you agree?" With hope in his voice, said the boy. "It's very tempting, but how will I explain everything to Stephen?" Camille continued to ask important questions. "You just tell him that you've met someone else and go to him. What this other man is, I don't have to say. If he wants to, let him see Robert in this speech. But I suppose he could just pay you off, give you money for your son, and let you go. I overheard my mom talking to her friends, and I know from them that this situation has happened before. I already have a half-brother or sister growing up somewhere, but my dad doesn't see him, he just sends money. Payoffs. Also, I'm sorry if I'm going to hurt you now. But this week I happened to see my father in a restaurant in the company of a long-legged girl who looks to be your age, maybe even younger. So make up your mind, but don't hesitate, Molly finished his speech. Yes, I knew he was having an affair, hiding his mistress from his mistress. That's absurd. How did I get into all this? Camille said sadly. Exactly. So what do you agree? Molly asked. Yes, I do. I want to be with you. Stephen will be here on Wednesday. I'll tell him everything. We'll see how he reacts, said the girl. Okay, I have to be in town to take care of some schoolwork. Write down my new number. And if anything happens, call me right away. Okay? Asked Molly. Okay, answered Camille and pressed herself against her lover. Don't be afraid. Everything will work out. Love will win, the guy encouraged her. Stephen really came to the mansion on Wednesday without gifts, although he had never come empty-handed before. The man and the girl sat down to dinner. Camille tried her best to pretend that this was their usual meeting. Although inside, in anticipation of a difficult conversation, she was trembling. She even wanted to give up the idea, but in the end she plucked up courage and told Stephen what she had promised Molly, without mentioning his name. The man was furious. How dare you, you ungrateful mutt? I picked you up a village fool. I made a man out of you. I didn't send you away with a potbelly, and you're looking left and right. Do you want to go? Don't even think about it. Sit still and don't even think about getting involved, you understand me? The man shouted. Camille had never seen him like this before. She didn't expect such a reaction. The girl nodded silently, apologized, and said that she had done something stupid. What did you do? Packed up and went to the car. I have to go into town. I have an important meeting tomorrow. You get your thoughts together and think about your behavior. I'll come back on Friday to check on you. Camille nodded silently, though she felt anger boiling in her chest. Her dignity was hurt. She wasn't about to become someone's slave. She called Molly and told him everything. He told her to pack her things. That same night, he came and took Camille and her son. They didn't take anything extra, no expensive gifts from Stephen, just the basic, necessary things. Molly had thoughtfully pulled a balaclava over his head. There were cameras in the yard. He could be tracked through the footage. The guy brought Camille and her brother to his apartment. It was not as luxurious as Stephen's place, but very cozy, modern. This is where we're gonna live. Can you exhale? Molly hugged the girl. Will your father not get to us? Camille asked fearfully. Don't worry. He doesn't know about this apartment. Grandfather kept the deal a secret. I'll say I'm staying with a friend who's in China, and I'll keep an eye on his place. I won't give you the address. Let me ask him. He won't. They said I'm bored in China and I'm going back home. That's all. True, you'll have to be kept secret from your family for the time being. But as you know, we're not very close. I live on my own, and then we'll move to the States, and no one will bother us there. Molly laid it all out convincingly. The plan seemed viable to Camille, and she began to settle in. For the first few months, she flinched at every rustle and sound, fearing that Stephen was breaking into the apartment. But then she calmed down and realized that the danger was over. Life was gradually getting better. The young people spent a lot of time together. Stephen studied remotely. Camille sat with the child and managed the household. Both were at-home neighbors, so there was harmony in their couple. The guy didn't lie with the fact that his family cared little about how and with whom he lived. His parents stayed out of his life in peace and harmony. A whole year had passed. Camille could not believe her happiness and kept waiting for a catch. But Molly reassured her and said that everything would be fine. Already in the spring I will get my diplomas, we will leave and we will definitely get married, he told her. Camille relaxed and, as it turned out, for nothing. One day she took Sveta for a walk. Molly was in China at the time. He went there to solve some study issues that arose. Returning home, the girl noticed that the door to the apartment was open. At first she wanted not to go in, to call the police, but then I don't know why, she opened the door and heard Stephen's voice. He was on the phone. Yes, Kitty, I found a new nest for us. It's my son's apartment. I only found out yesterday by accident. No, my son doesn't live here. He's staying at a friend's apartment. Don't ask me why he's weird. So I think I'll bring you here tomorrow and we'll spend Holy Night together for at least a year. That's weird. There's some stuff in here, and it's baby stuff. Where did they come from? Okay, baby, I'll call you back, said Stephen to his mistress and hung up. At that moment, Robert cried. The man heard it and ran into the hallway, where Camille and her son were standing. The girl rushed to the door, but Stephen was ahead of her. He locked the door and hid the key. How did you get in here? The bastard? Screamed the man. Me? I was just confused. Though wild to think, my son wasn't as simple as I thought. Aren't you the country love he killed the whole 11th grade for and couldn't forget for a long time? Isn't he the love you ran away from me in shame a year ago? The puzzle is complete, baby, Stephen said, and took Camille by the chin. Don't you dare touch me and call me that. The girl screamed and threw the man's hand away. What are you talking about? I'll behave the way I want to behave. I see what you mean. And who is that in your hands? Isn't that my heir to the check? Don't cry, baby. I'll take you away from your negligent mother and raise you to be a decent man. Not like your lazy big brother who was afraid to come out in the open. Having said that, Stephen literally ripped the boy out of his mother's arms, despite his screaming. I will call the police, Camille threatened. And what are you going to say? That your son was taken by his legal father, a respected businessman with wealth. Do I have to take away your parental rights? You probably don't work anywhere like that. You're not used to it. And you have no education. Stephen said with a smile. You won't get in, said the girl. They'll laugh at you. Stephen laughed in her face and then continued. So you have two options. The first. I take away your phone, you delete all accounts in social networks and leave with me, my son. And no more tricks with Molly or anyone else. The other, I take my son, terminate your parental rights, and you never see him again. It's your choice. Why would you do that? You've got tons of women. Leave us alone. Camille begged. This is a matter of principle, baby. No one had ever humiliated Stephen Wagpet like that. And for that, the man said. Camille cried and fell to her knees. Stop believing. Time, money. I'm waiting for your decision. Stephen rushed her. First. I choose the first option. Camille said in a trembling voice. Good girl. I always knew you were a good girl. Give me the phones. Don't even think about messing with Molly. He's a tough guy. He'll get over it. He's going to leave the country soon anyway. He'll find some American girl and forget you, Stephen said and led Camille away. He took her and her son to some country house she didn't know the address of. Camille paced like a wounded cat, imagining that Molly would take her departure as a betrayal. She struggled to find a phone somewhere, to call him and explain. But she feared she might lose her son if she did. Her face was constantly swollen with tears. The girl sat on sedatives. A few weeks later, Stephen arrived at the house. I made you, Robert, passports. Pack up, we're leaving, he commanded. Where to? Camille asked fearfully. Don't worry, you'll like it. I can't wish my son bad things, Stephen said. The girl obediently packed her bags and set off. On the way to the airport, she literally photographed the scenery, fearing that she may never return to her homeland. But she had her son with her, and that was the most important thing. Stephen took Camille and Robert to Cyprus. The sea air would be good for my heir, the man said. He put his mistress and son in a small villa in a small village on the Mediterranean coast. It was inland, but beautiful in nature and with every comfort. Sonora, how generous is your husband? You are very lucky. The maid said cheerfully as she greeted her. Camille made no reply. Soon Stephen flew away, promising to visit every month. I forgot the most important thing. I am taking your passports with me, so be smart. He said goodbye to Camille. The girl fell into a real depression. She found herself isolated from her native places and people, and most importantly from the man she loved, who probably considered her a coward, traitor, who ran away from him without explanation. But time, as we know, heals even the deepest wounds. Robert grew up and made his mother happy. He began to speak. Camille took an active part in the boy's development. They took long walks, swam in the sea, learned languages together. They got a dog, Charlie. He was a lot more fun. Stephen, as promised, first visited the villa once a week, but then his visits became more and more rare. The man had gotten his way, planted a tuck, a golden cage, and made sure it would not fly away again. Finally satisfied that Camille was not going anywhere from him, he calmed down. Meanwhile, on one of his visits, Stephen announced in a steady voice that Camille's mother had died of lung cancer. "I need to go to her funeral." The girl pleaded. "She's already been buried." The man said indifferently, "Just to the grave, then. Let me go for 2 days. I swear I'm not running anywhere," screamed Camille. "Well, you're a book, so I'm not letting you go anywhere. Besides, the man's gone. A grave is just a mound. Just remembering her. That'll be enough," Stephen said. To distract herself and escape from the cruel reality, the girl took up painting. She watched lessons on the internet, improving her skills. But she had an innate talent, and that was the most important thing. For a year, the girl painted exclusively for herself. But then she came up with the idea to try to sell her art so that her husband in no way facilitated her. Camille started a fake account, focused exclusively on the Western public. She herself had noticeably tightened up her English as well. She gave herself the pseudonym No One, and tried to exhibit her paintings, made according to all the canons of modern art. It took her another year to get them recognized in the West. Meanwhile, Stephen had no idea. Camille befriended the house servants and talked them into not giving away her passion to her patron. Works of certain copies began to sell actively and for a good price. Camille agreed with the maid that the money would come into her accounts, will withdraw them and give them to the artist, and keep the interest. Robert was already 3.5 years old. He understood that his mother was a famous artist and was very proud. Her paintings were sent to different countries by mail. Nika did not reveal her face. The public only knew that she lived in Cyprus. Usually, this delivery option satisfied all her clients. But suddenly there was an American who insisted on meeting the artist in person and shaking her hand for her talent. It was the gallery owner Justin Bloom, famous in his country. Camille had read a lot about him and longed to meet him, but was still wary of revealing his identity. "You have nothing to fear, Signora," the maid reassured her. "Signora Stephen had been here only recently, so we can't expect him anytime soon. Make your appointments for next week. And let this American Mr. come to visit us." Camille agreed to this and informed the gallerist that she was ready to receive him. The waiting time was exciting. On the appointed day, the doorbell rang at the mansion. Camille was waiting for her guest in her studio on the 2nd floor. The maid came up to her first. "Mr. has arrived with a friend, also an art connoisseur. Would you mind if he also came up to the studio to admire your paintings?" she asked. "Let the brave one go up," Camille replied. She heard footsteps on the stairs, and her heart raced. For 2 years, she had led a reclusive life, and here was such a meeting. But even more strongly, her heart began to exude when she saw the guests on the threshold of the studio. Standing next to the gallerists was none other than her beloved Molly. Camille, the dialogue of 2 years ago at the Stephen Mansion in Russia was repeated. "My Grebe. Allow me to introduce, this is my friend Molly Otis. He is Russian, but as far as I understand, you know each other, and as far as I understand, you are also Russian," the gallerist asked in astonishment. "That's right," Camille answered him in English. "It's not my Cypriot pseudonym. In fact, my name is Camille, and I am from Russia." "And how did you end up here?" Molly asked in amazement. "Mr. Bloom, may I leave you alone in my studio for a while?" "Mr. Otis and I have something to discuss," said Camille. "Of course, I've studied your masterpieces so far," replied the gallerist. Camille and Molly went into the next room. "Are you sure we have something to talk about?" Molly asked her with resentment in her voice. "Absolutely. Just after listening to me," Camille replied and told him the whole story. "You're not lying?" After listening to her, Molly asked, "Why would I lie to you? I want you to take it away. Change over here." Camille almost shouted. "You live in America now, right?" "Quite right," answered Molly. "So I'll think of something. I don't want to be your father's niece anymore. The only thing keeping me from throwing myself out the window is my son," tearfully begged her lover. "Don't worry, we'll think of something." My father, of course, a bad man, but I could not even imagine that he is capable of such meanness, said Molly. The main problem is that you and Robert don't have passports. Am I understanding this correctly? Yes, said Camille. We'll work it out. Justin is a very powerful man. He's got connections in all sorts of areas, including some not so legal, shall we say. I'll leave you my phone number and I'll call you tonight and tell you how we'll proceed. I won't lose you again, Molly said and hugged his lover. They then returned to the gallery so that the servants would not suspect anything untoward and made small talk on the subject of painting. Mr. Bloom bought several works by a certain Corbett, and the guests left the mansion that same evening. Molly called the number left at Camille's house and said Justin would help make fake passports for her. And Robert, think of a new name, her lover told her. Nancy in honor of Mom. With tears in her voice, said Camille, okay, you'll be Nancy Canada. Cypriot Kai, I will think of something for Robert now too. We will have to wait a few days or maybe weeks. When it's ready, I'll let you know. For security reasons, we will not be in contact for the time being. I love you, Molly said. I love you too, whispered Camille. Molly called a week later. Passports were ready. Tickets were bought to lure the girl and the boy out of the house. Justin had to be involved again. Mr. Bloom had charmed all the servants and gained their trust. So when he asked the landlady to give him a tour of Cyprus, no one had any questions. Camille was going to leave the house light. If she had brought a suitcase with her, there would have been too many questions. She took only a plush dog, which she gave to her mother's grandson a few years ago. As a result, Camille and her son, accompanied by the gallery owner, left the mansion, promising to return in a couple of hours. The maid, with whom she had made friends, as if she understood everything and crossed Camille in farewell. The latter nodded gratefully back at her. At the airport, she met Molly and collapsed into his arms. 12 o'clock later, they landed in New York. Welcome to your new life, MS. In Nancy, Canada. And I deviated. Mr. Bloom said goodbye and left Camille, Robert and Molly behind. I am excited, but very happy, said the girl. It will be all right, replied the man. I have absolutely no stuff. There's so much shopping to do, said Camille. It's nothing. We'll get everything we need. The important thing is that we're together. I told you that love will conquer everything. Molly winked and took Robert in his arms. Camille clung to her favorite boys and cried, for the first time in a long time, from happiness. Now she was a free bird, and she knew that no one would ever restrict her freedom again.